castle, hidden from Muggle eyes, a fortress of learning where young witches and wizards could hone their craft without fear of the pyre. They built it together, weaving charms into the very stone of the Scottish Highlands. The castle would become a home, a sanctuary, a repository for every magical secret they could gather. This was the Four Founders Compact, a pact to establish Hogwarts as the greatest school of witchcraft and wizardry the world had ever known. But even in the early days, while the walls were still being raised and the enchanted ceilings painted to reflect the heavens, the seeds of discord were being sown. The question at the heart of their alliance was simple, yet devastatingly complex. Who was worthy of magic? For Gryffindor, worthiness was about bravery and daring. For Hufflepuff, it was about fairness and hard work. For Ravenclaw, it was the sharpness of the mind. But for Slytherin, it was about blood. He looked at the wizarding world and saw it being diluted. He saw Muggleborns who he believed were given magic by accident or theft, a dangerous instability in the very fabric of their world. The early signs of friction were polite at first, philosophical debates in the castle's upper chambers that slowly turned to cold silence. Slytherin began to favour a specific kind of student, the cunning, the ambitious, the pure-blooded. He saw the other founders' inclusivity as naivety. He argued that bringing Muggle-borns into the fold invited discovery, invited the chaos of the Muggle world into their sanctuary. Gryffindor, a man of action and honour, clashed fiercely. How could you judge a child's soul before they had even held a wand? Hufflepuff argued for a fair chance for all, regardless of birth. Ravenclaw sought logic, but could not reconcile Slytherin's blood-based bigotry with a measurable standard of magical talent. The sanctuary they built together was slowly becoming a prison for Slytherin's ideals. He looked around the halls he helped construct and saw his vision being undermined by what he viewed as a dangerous generosity. The compact, the very agreement that bound them, was beginning to fray. The question of worthiness was not a simple one. It was a fracture that ran deeper than the castle's dungeons. A crack in the foundation of Hogwarts itself. Slytherin began to prepare for a future where his philosophy would not be welcomed, while the other founders focused on the next lesson, the next student, the next generation. Slytherin focused on a legacy. He built a hidden room deep beneath the school, a chamber that was his alone, where he could speak his true mind without judgment. He did not leave the school on a whim. He was forced out by a vision of the future he could no longer share. The Four Founders Compact was a beautiful dream, but it was a dream built on a compromise that was growing impossible to maintain. The sanctuary became a battleground of ideals, and the rift between Gryffindor and Slytherin was no longer just a disagreement, it was a schism. The details of that break, the final confrontation that sealed Slytherin's legacy as the darkest of the founders, is the story of Chapter 4, The Great Schism. It is the moment the Chamber of Secrets was no longer a possibility, but a certainty. The bond between the four founders was never as simple as the stories suggest. For years, Godric Gryffindor and Salazar Slytherin had stood side by side, two of the most powerful wizards of the late 10th century, each with a vision for what Hogwarts could become. But as the castle took shape and the first students arrived, cracks began to form in that alliance, hairline fractures that would eventually shatter the unity of the founders forever. The argument started quietly, almost imperceptibly, like whispers carried on a drafty corridor. Slytherin had always held strong opinions about the nature of magic and who deserved to wield it. Gryffindor, by contrast, believed in courage and merit above all else, regardless of blood. The two men had debated these ideas before, but never with such heat, never with such finality. The core of the disagreement seemed small at first, a question of admissions. Slytherin grew increasingly vocal about the children of Muggles. those born to non-magical parents. He argued that their magic was unstable, that they lacked the inherent depth of understanding that came from generations of magical lineage. Gryffindor countered that every witch or wizard, no matter their origin, deserved a chance to prove themselves. Rowena Ravenclaw, ever the intellectual, tried to mediate, suggesting that all magical children should be judged on their wisdom and learning, not their ancestry. Helga Hufflepuff, patient and fair, insisted that every student be welcomed equally, offering a place to all who wished to learn. But Slytherin would not be swayed. His conviction hardened into something darker. The moment the alliance broke came during one of their final meetings, in a chamber that no longer exists, somewhere deep in the original castle. The four founders sat around a rough-hewn table, lantern light flickering across their faces. Slytherin made his demand explicit. From that day forward, no child of Muggle parentage would be allowed to set foot in Hogwarts. He wanted a formal decree, a rule etched into the very foundation of the school. Gryffindor rose from his seat, his hand moving instinctively toward the sword that would later bear his name. He told Slytherin, in a voice that carried the weight of a thunderstorm, that such a policy was not only wrong, it was a betrayal of everything they had built together. The argument that followed was not just about ideology, it was personal. Two men who had once trusted each other with their life now stood as adversaries, their voices echoing through the stone corridors. Hufflepuff tried to calm the situation, reminding them of their original dream. Ravenclaw proposed a compromise, perhaps a trial period or a test of magical aptitude that would apply to all students equally. But Slytherin refused. He saw Muggle-born magic as a contamination, a dilution of pure magical blood. He told Gryffindor that if the school would not be purified, then he would leave it. And he did. Salazar Slytherin walked out of that meeting, out of the castle he had helped design, and vanished into the misty marshes of the Fen Country. But he did not leave without a plan. Before he departed, he set in motion a secret construction project, one that would ensure his legacy and his wrath remained hidden beneath the school for 1,000 years. What Slytherin built in those final days was not meant for anyone else to find. It was a chamber, concealed so cunningly that even the other founders, with all their magical prowess, never discovered its location. He used his own magic, possibly aided by house elves or darker forces, to carve out a space deep beneath Hogwarts, far below the dungeons, far below the lake. And inside that chamber, he placed a guardian, a creature born from an egg that had been incubated in the most unnatural of ways, a basilisk, the king of serpents. This was not a spontaneous act of spite. Slytherin had been preparing for this moment for years. Perhaps since the school first opened. The chamber was his insurance policy, his final word in the argument that had torn the founders apart. He sealed the entrance with a magic that only a parcel mouth could unlock, a language that slithered like the serpents he so admired. And he placed the basilisk in a deep, enchanted sleep, waiting for the day when his true heir would return and open the chamber once more. The other founders knew that Slytherin had left something behind. They could feel it, a cold presence in the depths of the castle, but they could never find it. Gryffindor, in particular, searched for the hidden room, his frustration growing as the years passed. He died never knowing where it lay, or what monster slept within. And so the legend of the Chamber of Secrets was born. A ghost story whispered by students for centuries. A rumour that the founder of Slytherin House had not truly left, but had merely gone underground. That hidden construction project, that dark and secret place, is what we now call the Chamber of Secrets. And the monster that sleeps inside is the Serpent of Slytherin, the Basilisk. But understanding what the chamber is and why it was built requires us to explore its architecture, its magic, and its terrifying purpose. That is the story we will follow next. The architecture of the Abyss itself. When the Great Schism tore the four founders apart, Salazar Slytherin did not simply storm out of the castle and vanish into the Fen Country. He left behind something far more enduring than a legacy of bitterness. He left a scar carved directly into the bedrock of Hogwarts itself, a hidden wound that would fester for nearly 1,000 years. The Chamber of Secrets was never an afterthought or a hasty escape route. It was a deliberate, calculated act of architectural defiance, a dungeon designed to exist in the very heart of the school while remaining invisible to every magical detection charm the other founders could devise. The sheer audacity of the project is staggering. Hogwarts was already one of the most powerfully enchanted structures in the wizarding world, a fortress of ancient magic woven into every stone and stair. To carve out a vast subterranean chamber beneath that fortress, without triggering a single ward or alerting the other founders, required a level of magical sophistication that borders on the impossible. How did Slytherin achieve it? The records are sparse, but the surviving clues point to two key elements: his mastery of what we might call foundational magic, and the quiet, tireless labour of house elves. House elves have always been associated with hidden work, with the unseen maintenance of great magical households, but their role in the construction of the chamber may have been far more central than legend admits. A house elf's magic is peculiar, bound to the will of its master, and often invisible to standard detection spells. If Slytherin commanded a cadre of elves to excavate the tunnels and shape the stone, their work would have left no trace of conventional spellcasting. They would have moved earth and carved passages with a quiet efficiency that sidestepped the school's own protective enchantments. Of course, Salazar himself was no mere overseer. He was a parcel mouth of extraordinary power, and his ability to command serpents extended to the very earth that snakes beneath the castle. It is said that he coaxed the water tables and the deep rock into yielding to him, using a language older than human speech to persuade the foundations of the hill to part and hollow themselves out. The engineering challenge was immense. Hogwarts sits atop a complex network of natural caves and underground streams, but the chamber had to be more than just a hidden cave. It had to be a self-contained environment, sealed from the school's intruder charms, its own air supply, its own magical ecosystem. Slytherin designed the entrance to respond only to Parseltongue, a biological key that no spell or enchanted object could replicate. The entrance itself, hidden behind a wall in the dungeons, was disguised to appear a solid stone to any other probing magic, and once inside, the chamber unfolded in a way that was as much a statement of intent as it was a functional space. You enter first through a long, dark tunnel that slopes downward, the air growing colder and damper, the sound of your own breathing amplifying in the silence. Then the tunnel opens into a vast, cathedral-like hall, its ceiling lost in shadow. Pillars carved to resemble coiled serpents rise on either side, their stone eyes glowing with a faint green luminescence. And at the far end, dominating the entire space, stands the statue of Salazar Slytherin himself. It is not a modest likeness. He is depicted as a towering figure, his face stern and ancient, his beard flowing down to his chest, his robes carved to suggest movement and authority. He sits on a throne of stone, and his mouth is a gaping black hole that leads deeper into the earth to the lair of the Basilisk. This statue is the centerpiece of the chamber's symbolic architecture. It is not merely a portrait or a memorial. It is a monument to Slytherin's ego, a declaration that he alone is the true founder, the one who sees beyond the petty morality of the other three. The very layout of the chamber forces anyone who enters to walk the length of the hall, past the serpent pillars, past the water that pools at the base of the statue, and to stand in awe before his image before they can even approach the monster's resting place. It is a ritual of submission, a spatial reminder that to enter the chamber is to accept Slytherin's judgment, that the engineering went deeper than mere spectacle. The chamber was designed as a dungeon, in the purest sense, a prison for a creature too dangerous to roam free, yet perfectly suited to the task of purging the school of Muggle-born students. Slytherin understood that the Basilisk would need to be dormant for centuries, sustained by the ambient magic of the castle and the deep earth. The pool of water at the base of the statue is not just decorative. It connects to an underground aquifer, providing moisture and a constant temperature. The ventilation shafts, hidden in the serpent pillars, allow the basilisk to breathe while keeping any scent of it from reaching the school above. Every element is purposeful, from the echoes that mask sound to the stone that absorbs spell residue. And yet, for all its complexity, the chamber was not built to be opened immediately. Slytherin knew he would not live to see his vision fulfilled. He trusted that a true heir would one day arise, someone who could speak Parseltongue and who would understand the full weight of the legacy. The chamber was a time capsule of resentment, a final act of rebellion against the founders who had rejected him. But Slytherin did not leave the monster alone. He left it asleep, waiting for the moment when the heir would utter the word of awakening, and he placed inside that stone mouth the very egg that would hatch into the basilisk, the serpent that would become the instrument of his revenge. It is that egg and its terrible gestation that leads us directly into the next chapter of this story. For the basilisk was not simply conjured into existence, it was born, and its birth was the result of a dark and ancient process that Slytherin perfected in the shadows of the chamber. The creature that would haunt Hogwarts for a millennium had a beginning, and that beginning is steeped in a magic so forbidden that even the other founders would have recoiled. What Slytherin did in that cold stone womb before he sealed the chamber for the first time is the subject of our next chapter. The birth of the Basilisk. The Chamber of Secrets was a masterpiece of silent stone, an abyss carved into the bones of Hogwarts. It was a stage waiting for a player, a prison waiting for its prisoner. But a dungeon designed for purging is nothing without the mechanism of execution. Slytherin had built the room, the labyrinth, the hidden entrance. Now, he needed to fill the silence with the terror. Why a living creature at all? Why not a complex series of cursed traps, a golem of enchanted stone, or an Inferius that could be remotely commanded from the grave? The answer is found in the very nature of the man himself. Slytherin did not want a simple killer. He wanted a living indictment of the unworthy. A conventional guardian lacks the capacity for judgment. A troll swinging a club cannot discern between purity and impurity. A trapped floor that drops a victim into a pit cares nothing for their bloodline. Slytherin needed an executioner that was as bound to his bloodline as the very magic of Hogwarts was bound to the founders. He needed a creature that spoke the same language he did, not just in spoken words, but in the language of the soul. He was a Parselmouth, and the deepest, most intimate magic he commanded was the magic of the Serpent. This is why he did not choose a dragon from the northern fells, nor a manticore from the Mediterranean, nor a giant from the mountains. These were powerful, certainly, but they were blunt instruments. They could kill, but they could not serve as a selective terror. A basilisk, on the other hand, is the king of serpents. It is a creature whose very gaze is a judgment. To meet its eye is to have your soul looked upon and found utterly wanting. The indirect gaze, the reflection, the petrification. This was a weapon of precision. It had nuance. It could purge the unworthy, and it could terrify the rest. It could act as a living deterrent for the impure, while being a perfectly obedient weapon in the hands of the true heir. But the raw power of a basilisk is not born from nature. It is a creature of pure magical contrivance, forged in the darkest crucible of magical perversion. Slytherin was not the first to attempt such a creation. That dark honour is to a wizard whose name is spoken only in the most ancient and cursed texts. Herpo the Fool. Herpo lived in an age before the Founders. An age when magic was wilder and the boundaries between creation and corruption were terrifyingly thin. It was Herpo who discovered the specific, terrible ritual required to birth a basilisk. It begins with an egg, a simple chicken egg, but it cannot be hatched by natural warmth or a mother's care. It must be incubated by a toad. The egg is buried in cold, damp earth, and a toad is set upon it. The natural magic of the chicken is twisted, poisoned by the amphibious, dark-aligned energies of the toad. The creature that emerges is not a serpent in the traditional biological sense. It is a magical chimera, a reptile imbued with a lethal power that defies every law of nature. It is a perversion of the cycle of life, a being born from the worst intentions of a dark wizard. Slytherin, in his exile from the public halls of the school, did not simply replicate Herpo's ritual, he refined it. He understood that a wild basilisk could not be trusted. It was a beast of pure instinct, a blind and burning killing machine. He needed a weapon he could aim. He needed a tool of legacy. So, Salazar took the base ritual of the basilisk and he wove into it the very essence of his own magical identity. He bound the creature to the Parseltongue language. He encoded the commands of the hare into the creature's unborn mind. This is the binding that ensured the creature would only obey a true descendant. It was not a simple loyalty charm. It was a blood bond, an inheritance. The basilisk's obedience was written into its chromosomes, into the very magic that animated its serpentine heart. When the egg finally hatched in the absolute darkness of the newly completed chamber, the first awareness that the female serpent experienced was not the warmth of a mother. It was the will of Salazar Slytherin, impressed upon its soul through the magic of the binding. The creature did not know freedom. It knew only the will of its master and the promise of his bloodline. It was then placed into a slumber so deep it defied the centuries. A living spell, suspended in time, dreaming of the hunt. It would wait, breathing slow, coiled in the darkness behind the statue of its creator, until the right voice spoke the words of waking. This was the vessel of Slytherin's revenge. A creature born from a corrupted ritual, perfected by a founder's genius, and bound by a curse of absolute obedience. But to understand how this creature almost succeeded, how it managed to threaten the entire legacy of Hogwarts, and remain hidden for 1,000 years, we have to look closer at its fascinating biology. We have to understand the specific mechanics of its gaze, the precise potency of its venom, and the surprising vulnerabilities hidden in its ancient, scaly hide. This is the story of the serpent's physical form. This is the anatomy of the king of serpents. So there it was, born from a chicken egg, incubated beneath a toad, a creature that had no place in the natural order. Salazar Slytherin had chosen his guardian, not because it was the most fearsome beast he could find, but because it was the most precise instrument of selective death. A basilisk does not maul or crush indiscriminately. It kills with a look, and that look could be controlled, aimed only at those the higher deemed unworthy. But controlling such a weapon required understanding its anatomy, its vulnerabilities, and its terrifying strengths. And the first thing you need to know about the King of Serpents is that it was not born small. The basilisk that slumbered beneath Hogwarts was a female, and in the world of serpents, females often grow larger than males, By the time Harry Potter faced her in 1993, she measured over 50 feet in length. That is longer than a London double-decker bus. Longer than the corridor of the chamber itself. Her body was thick as an ancient oak trunk, and when she moved, the ground trembled. But size alone would not have made her invincible. What made her almost impossible to kill was the armor she wore. The scales of a basilisk are not like those of an ordinary snake. They are thick, layered, imbued with a kind of dark magic that seems to repel most spells and charms. In the wizarding world, there are creatures whose hide can deflect a stunning spell or a hex. But the basilisk's skin goes further. It is resistant to almost every form of offensive magic that a typical wizard might cast. A simple knockback jinx would barely ruffle those scales. A petrification charm, the kind used on trolls, would slide off like water. This resistance was by design. Slytherin needed a guardian that could withstand the combined efforts of Hogwarts professors. Should they ever discover the chamber, and for nearly 1,000 years, that defense held. The scales themselves are not uniform. Along the back and sides, they are thickest, overlapping like dragon hide. But the belly is softer, more vulnerable, though still far tougher than the skin of any ordinary snake. The colouring is a vivid, poisonous green, often described as emerald, with patterns that shimmer in low light. It is said that the basilisk scales have a faint, sickly luminescence, a byproduct of the venom that courses through its entire body. And that venom is not just in the fangs. It saturates the flesh, the blood, even the scales, giving them a kind of magical potency. This is why basilisk skin is such a prized ingredient in dark alchemy. A single scale, ground to powder, can be used to brew poisons of unparalleled deadliness. But perhaps the most extraordinary property of that skin is its ability to block vision in a peculiar way. It does not reflect light, quite like normal surfaces, which becomes critical when we talk about the creature's most infamous weapon, the killing gaze. The mechanics of the basilisk's gaze have been misunderstood for centuries. In Muggle folklore, the basilisk is said to kill with a glance, and the medieval bestiaries often depict it as a small serpent with a crown on its head. But the wizarding world has a more nuanced understanding. The gaze of a true basilisk is lethal only when the eyes meet directly. That direct line of sight triggers a reaction so fast that the victim's body simply stops. Heart, lungs, brain all cease functioning instantly. There is no pain, no warning. One moment you are looking at the serpent, the next you are dead. But here is where the peculiar biology comes into play. If you do not look directly into its eyes, if you see the creature only through a reflection, the effect is not death but petrification. This is a fascinating loophole in the basilisk's own nature. The gaze itself is a beam of concentrated dark energy, a kind of magical radiation that travels through space. When it strikes living tissue directly, it overloads the nervous system with necrotic magic. But when it passes through a reflective surface, the energy is diffused, scattered, like light through a prism. The lethal frequency is dampened, and what remains is a paralyzing curse that turns the victim's flesh to stone without fully extinguishing life. That is why the petrified students in 1992 were still alive, frozen but not dead. They had seen the basilisk through the reflection of a puddle, a camera lens, or a ghost's watery surface. The indirect gaze saved them, just barely. Why does the basilisk's own skin not function as a mirror? That is a subtle point. Basilisk scales, as we mentioned, are non-reflective in the magical sense. They absorb rather than reflect. So if the basilisk looked at itself in a mirror, the gaze would still be direct, because the mirror is the only surface that can properly deflect the energy. In ancient legends, a basilisk could be killed by showing it its own reflection. But that only works if the creature sees itself in a true mirror. In the chamber, there were no such mirrors. Slytherin had designed the lair to avoid that weakness. So the King of Serpents was a living fortress of scale and venom, with a gaze that could kill from a distance, and a hide that shrugged off nearly every spell. But even the most formidable weapons have a flaw, and the Basilisk's flaw was not in its armour or its eyes. It was in the very structure of its head. When Harry Potter drove the sword of Gryffindor through the roof of its mouth, he pierced a spot where the scales were thinnest, just behind the fangs, a fatal blow to an otherwise invulnerable beast. And that venom, that corrosive, life-destroying venom, would have consequences far beyond that single moment. For the Basilisk's venom did not just kill the monster, it also destroyed a Horcrux, and in the process unlocked a chain of events that would ripple through the wizarding world for years to come. The story of that venom, its origin, its potency, and its role in the destruction of Tom Riddle's soul is a tale for another time. But the King of Serpents leaves behind not just a legacy of fear, but a residue of pure, undiluted darkness. And that darkness, as we shall see, had a name of its own. The next chapter explores exactly how that venom was harvested, what it could do, and why it became one of the most dangerous substances in magical history. The story of the chamber is not over. It is only now, with the monster dead, that its true poison begins to spread. The previous chapter left us in the silent, echoing darkness of the chamber, contemplating the biology of the King of Serpents. We considered its armoured scales, its impossible size, and the terrible mechanics of its gaze. How a direct look meant instant death, while a reflection could freeze a victim in stone. But there is another weapon this creature carried, one that was not immediately obvious in the green glow of its eyes, yet perhaps even more insidious. I am speaking, of course, of the venom. In the wizarding world, there are many dangerous substances: dragon heartstring residue, powdered moonstone, the essence of dittany when misused. But none compare to the potency of basilisk venom. This is not merely a poison in the conventional sense. It is a corrosive, cursed fluid that seems to attack the very fabric of magical matter. When the basilisk's fang pierces flesh, the venom does not simply kill the body. It unravels the enchantments that hold that body together. It is one of the few things in existence that can destroy a Horcrux. Now let us understand why that matters so deeply. A Horcrux is an object in which a dark wizard has hidden a fragment of their soul. The process, murder, a ritual, the fracturing of the soul, is one of the darkest magics known. Once created, a Horcrux is almost indestructible. Ordinary weapons, ordinary spells, even fire cannot touch it. The soul fragment clings to the object with a desperate tenacity, protected by deep magic. But basilisk venom is different. It has a property that magical theorists have studied for centuries, though few ever witness it firsthand. The venom does not just attack the physical form. It attacks the magical signature embedded within. It seeps into the cracks of a Horcrux and dissolves the binding that holds the soul fragment in place. The Diary of Tom Riddle, one of his very first Horcruxes, was destroyed when a single basilisk fang, still glistening with venom, was plunged into its pages. The ink bled, the paper screamed, and the soul fragment was annihilated. That is the power we are talking about. But here is the tragic irony that we must sit with for a moment. The basilisk was created by Salazar Slytherin as a weapon to purge the school of Muggle-born students. It was meant to be the ultimate tool of the Heir, a serpent of destruction that would carry out the will of its master. And yet in the end, that same weapon, those fangs, that venom, became the instrument that destroyed the master's own soul. Tom Riddle, the Heir of Slytherin, had poured his soul into that diary, and it was the monster's own venom that wiped it from existence. The very power that Slytherin built to enforce purity was turned against the most impure of all magics. the mutilation of the soul. It is a poetic justice that runs through the entire history of the chamber. The monster that was meant to preserve the pure bloodline instead became the tool that dismantled one of its greatest descendants. And this venom, this liquid death, would go on to touch other Horcruxes as well, years later, in ways that we will explore when we look at the final battles of the war. But for now, understand that the Basilisk's venom was not just a poison. It was a key, a lockpick to the darkest magic ever conceived. There is another artifact connected to this creature, one that we have not yet examined, a wand made of snakewood and basilisk horn. That wand belongs to Salazar Slytherin himself, and its story is woven with the same venomous thread. The Snakewood Wand holds secrets that go beyond the chamber, and in our next chapter, we will uncover exactly how its maker crafted it, and what became of it after Slytherin left Hogwarts. For now, let the image of that venomous fang linger, a reminder that even the darkest weapon can be turned against its wielder. The venom of the basilisk, as we have seen, is among the most catastrophic substances in the magical world. It can destroy Horcruxes, dissolve enchantments, and kill anything with a heartbeat in seconds. But that venom was not only a weapon, it was also the key to a secret that Salazar Slytherin guarded more fiercely than the chamber itself. For the venom of the monster did not only flow through its fangs, it was also locked into the very core of Slytherin's own wand. This wand was not like others of its era. Most wizards of the 10th century chose cores of dragon heartstring, phoenix feather, or unicorn hair. Slytherin chose something far more intimate. He crafted his wand from a branch of snakewood, a rare and treacherous timber that grows only in the most venomous of forests. Snakewood is dense, dark, and almost oily to the touch, and it is said to possess a natural affinity for serpents. But it was the core that made the wand truly unique. Instead of a conventional magical substance, Slytherin embedded a sliver of basilisk horn. Not just any basilisk horn, but the horn of the very creature he had placed in the chamber. This wand was not merely a tool for casting spells. It was a living extension of the monster itself. The bond between the wand and the basilisk was profound, because the core came from the same creature that guarded the chamber. The wand could be used to sense the monster's state, to feel its hunger, its slumber, its agitation. In a way, the wand acted as a sympathetically linked piece of the basilisk's own body. When the monster was asleep, the wand grew cold and still. When it stirred, the wand would vibrate with a faint, almost subsonic hum. But the wand had one more secret, and it was perhaps the most dangerous of all. It could be put to sleep, or it could be awakened. Slytherin designed the wand to be inert, unless activated by the appropriate command. That command was not a spell in the traditional sense. It was Parseltongue. A simple phrase spoken in the language of snakes would rouse the wand from its dormancy, and only then would it channel its full power. Without the hiss of the serpent, the wand remained a dead thing, a piece of wood and horn that could barely produce a spark. But in the hands of a Parselmouth, it became one of the most formidable instruments of dark magic ever fashioned. This was Slytherin's safeguard. He knew that only his true heir, someone who carried his blood and his gift, would be able to awaken the wand. And with the wand awake, the heir could then awaken the basilisk itself. The connection between the wand's core and the monster in the chamber was not merely symbolic, it was functional. The same Parseltongue command that stirred the wand could also be used to rouse the basilisk from its centuries of sleep. The wand served as a tuning fork, a key that resonated with the creature's own magic. When the heir spoke the words, the wand would pulse, and deep beneath the school, the basilisk would open its eyes. This is why the chamber remained sealed for so long. Without a Parselmouth who possessed the wand, or at least the knowledge of the command, The monster could never be unleashed. Tom Riddle understood this. He knew that the wand had been lost, but he also knew that his own voice, his Parseltongue, was enough to bypass the need for the physical object. He was the heir, and his bloodline was the true key. But the wand itself, if it still existed, would have been the ultimate instrument of control. Some whispers in wizarding history suggest that the wand was hidden somewhere within the chamber, perhaps in the very hands of Slytherin's statue. Others believe it was destroyed, or that it was passed down through the Gaunt family and eventually lost. But the truth is that the wand's power was never in its physical form alone. It was in the language. The hissing syllables that could wake it were the same syllables that could command the Basilisk. Slytherin had woven his legacy not into wood and horn, but into sound, and that sound would echo through the ages. This intimate relationship between language and magic is something we will explore further when we turn our attention to the very words Slytherin used to command his creation. The way snakes speak is not just a trick of the tongue. It is a fundamental force that binds the heir to the beast. And that brings us to the subject of our next chapter, the language of snakes. Salazar Slytherin built his wand to slumber. It required a specific key to wake it. Not a password, not a specific spell, but a voice. The voice of a parcel mouth. That simple truth, that a magical instrument could be designed to only respond to a specific human sound, reveals the deepest layer of his paranoia and his pride. He did not trust wizards. He trusted serpents, and he trusted the blood that spoke their language. The Snakewood Wand was merely a practice run for the true security system he left behind. The Chamber of Secrets itself was coded in the same tongue. This is the story of that language, the linguistic bridge between the founder and the monster, and the weight it carried through history. Parseltongue was not just rare, it was actively feared. Throughout magical history, it has stood as a scarlet letter, a mark of the darkest lineage. It is not a skill you can acquire from a book or practice in a dueling chamber. True Parseltongue is a hereditary gift, an inherited resonance that appears in only a handful of bloodlines, and almost exclusively through the direct descendants of Salazar Slytherin. This extreme rarity created a profound cultural stigma. In the centuries following the founder's exodus from Hogwarts, the ability to speak to snakes became synonymous with dark magic, with deceit, and with the most extreme forms of pure-blood supremacy. A known parselmouth was treated with a wary respect, but far more often with outright suspicion. They were considered unnatural, their mouths speaking a hissing tongue that did not belong in the world of men. The stigma was so ingrained that a century later, a hero like Harry Potter felt the need to hide his ability for fear of being misjudged. The language itself carries a curse of isolation for those who inherit it. This bloodline, however, was not just a matter of pride, it was a genetic key. Parseltongue functions as a biological lock, an impossible barrier for anyone outside the Slytherin line to bypass. The entrance to the chamber is not sealed with an enchantment that can be broken with a counter-curse, nor is it hidden by a spell that can be revealed. It is sealed by a command in a language that cannot be learned by the vast majority of the wizarding population. You could stand in the girls' bathroom for 1,000 years, uttering every known incantation, and the sink would never open. But the moment a true Parselmouth hisses the word open, the stone obeys. This is the elegance and the terror of Slytherin's design. He created a system so specific, so reliant on blood trust, that no enemy could ever infiltrate it. The Basilisk itself was bound by this same rule. It would only answer the voice of the heir. The magic of the chamber is a closed loop, a circuit that requires the exact magical signature of Salazar Slytherin's own bloodline to complete. It is a language of absolute loyalty. But what does it mean to be the vessel for that voice? In 1992, Hogwarts became a haunted house of whispers. Harry Potter began to hear a phantom speech in the walls, a voice that coiled through the plumbing, a voice that hissed words of hunger and murder, rip, tear, kill. The sound was barely audible to him, but the meaning was unmistakably violent. He felt compelled to follow it, drawn like a moth to a flame, finding himself at the scene of each attack before he even understood what he was doing. This is the psychological burden of the Parselmouth. You are bonded to the mind of the Serpent. You cannot choose what you hear. When the Basilisk moved through the pipes, it spoke, and Harry, alone among the hundreds of students in the castle, had to listen. The voice was an intrusion, a leak in the walls of reality. It connected him directly to a monster he wanted no part of. The language was not just a tool of power, it was a haunting. To hear the voice of the monster in the walls is to feel the weight of history pressing against your skull. It is the sound of 1,000 years of pure blood pride and pure blood madness echoing through the stone. It is the sound of your own blood, speaking to a darkness you did not choose. Harry possessed the key, but he was not the heir. He could understand the voice, but he could not command it. This is the terrifying middle ground of the Parselmouth. You are fluent in a language of violence, but you have no ownership of the words. You are merely a listener, and yet this key had to come from somewhere. It had to be preserved. The ability to speak Parseltongue is a thread that runs straight through the centuries, linking the founder to a single, decaying family, the Gaunts. They guarded the secret of the chamber with a rabid possessiveness. They held the locket, they held the language, they held the bloodline, and they held the arrogance that would eventually destroy them. The story of the Gaunt family is the story of what happens when a genetic key becomes a curse. It is a story of incest, madness, and the desperate clinging to a past that no longer mattered. It is the story of a family drinking poison from the cup of legacy, and that unravelling brings us directly into our next chapter, the chapter titled The Gaunt Dynasty, and the final poisonous inheritance of the snake's tongue. We left off with Parseltongue, the language of snakes, passed down through the centuries like a genetic key, hidden deep within the blood. But a key is useless without a hand to wield it, and a secret is nothing without a keeper. For nearly 1,000 years, the secret of the Chamber of Secrets was guarded by a single family, a direct line stretching back to Salazar Slytherin himself. They were the Gaunts, and their story is not one of power or glory, but of a slow, agonizing decay into madness and poverty. The decline of the Slytherin bloodline into the impoverished and volatile Gaunt family is one of the most tragic ironies in magical history. By the 20th century, the direct descendants of one of Hogwarts' founders were living in a ramshackle cottage outside the Muggle village of Little Hangleton. Marvolo Gaunt, the patriarch, was a violent and foul-tempered man who wore rags and sported a broken wand. The family fortune had long since been squandered on delusions of grandeur and lawsuits against neighbours they deemed beneath them. Everything about their existence screamed failure, except for the two objects they guarded obsessively: the signet ring of the Peverells, which Marvolo wore as a symbol of his lineage, and the golden locket of Salazar Slytherin, hidden away as the ultimate proof of their heritage. These artifacts were their only connection to a past that was otherwise completely lost. The Gaunts were inbred, volatile, and deeply unstable. Their magic was wild and uncontrolled, a shadow of the power their ancestor once commanded. They clung to the idea of pure blood with a ferocity that was almost pathetic, because it was all they had left. They had no influence, no wealth, and no future. All they possessed was the story, and that story was everything. How was the secret of the chamber preserved? through oral tradition and arrogance. It was never written down, not in books, not on parchment. The location of the entrance, the nature of the beast, the purpose of the dungeon. It all lived inside the skulls of the Gaunt family, passed from father to son, generation after generation. Marvolo would boast about it constantly. He would rant to anyone who would listen about his ancestor, Salazar, and the monster sleeping beneath the school. He called his son Morfin a fool for not respecting their heritage. The ministry officials and the Muggle authorities dismissed it all as the ravings of a mad old man, but that is precisely why the secret was safe. The secret was preserved by their arrogance, because no one believed them. No one thought the pathetic, impoverished Gaunts could possibly possess a truth that had eluded the greatest magical minds for centuries. The secret festered inside that family like a poison, passed down as a boast and a curse, kept alive entirely by the one thing they never lost, their pride. That pride, that obsession with the purity of their blood, is what eventually destroyed them completely. Marvolo raised his children in complete isolation, teaching them that they were superior to everyone else, especially Muggles. His daughter Merope was crushed under his tyranny. She had no magic of her own, or at least none that could flourish in that oppressive environment. But she fell in love with a handsome Muggle from the village, Tom Riddle Sr. The family's obsession with purity that eventually led to their own ruin reached its final act where Merope drugged her father and brother and ran away with the Muggle. She bewitched him with a love potion, married him, and became pregnant. But she desperately wanted him to love her for real. She stopped using the potion. He woke up, saw her for who she was, and abandoned her immediately. Pregnant and utterly destitute, Merope sold the golden locket of Slytherin for a pittance to a passing merchant. She died shortly after giving birth in a Muggle orphanage. Her son was named Tom Marvolo Riddle. Marvolo and Morfin were sent to Azkaban for attacking ministry officials. The direct line of the Gaunt family ended in disgrace, madness and death. The secret of the chamber could have died with them, lost forever in the squalor of Little Hangleton, but it did not. The heir of Slytherin survived in that orphanage. Tom Riddle grew up obsessed with his heritage, and when he finally learned the truth, he took the secret his family had guarded for 1,000 years and put it to its intended use. But how did the Gaunts actually know the specifics of the location? How did the precise knowledge of the entrance survive the centuries when the family itself could barely function? The answer is buried in the castle's history, tied to a specific event that connects the Founders' era to the modern plumbing of Hogwarts. In the next chapter, we will follow the thread back to a particularly resourceful Gaunt ancestor who faced a crisis that threatened to expose everything. His solution created a direct pathway that no one ever expected. This is the story of Corvinus Gaunt and the plumbing crisis. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. The Gaunt family we have traced so far were, by and large, a reclusive and declining line. Their mark on magical history was defined by their temper and their pride. But hidden within the family tree, there was one who did not squander the Slytherin legacy, but instead fortified it. His name was Corvinus Gaunt, and he faced a crisis that no other descendant of Salazar Slytherin had ever anticipated. A crisis not of dark magic or a rival house, but of modern infrastructure. By the 18th century, Hogwarts was 800 years old. The castle was drafty, damp, and profoundly medieval. The founders would have recognized it instantly, but the Ministry of Magic, in its endless push for regulation and convenience, decided that the school needed to be brought into the modern age. Pipes had to be laid, bathrooms had to be built. Magical engineers began to dig and enchant, threading copper and stone through the very bones of the castle. For the Heir of Slytherin, this was a nightmare. The Chamber of Secrets, sealed for nearly a millennium, was suddenly surrounded by the sound of pickaxes and the flow of rushing water. Every hammer strike against a foundation wall was a potential exposure of the entrance. The secret of Salazar Slytherin lay directly in the path of progress. A single misplaced tunnel, a single inspection of subsidence, and the entrance could be discovered. The greatest dark artifact of the Founders, the hidden dungeon that had never been breached, would be reduced to an architectural footnote in a plumbing survey. Corvinus Gaunt was a professor at the school at the time. He was a man of considerable influence who understood that the Gaunt family secret could not be allowed to perish at the hands of a ministry pipe fitter. He could not stop the modernization. The political tide was too strong, so he did something far more cunning than resistance. He volunteered to oversee the new additions. He inserted himself into every planning meeting. He guided the contractors, and he built the hiding place of the century. The entrance to the chamber was never meant to be a grand door of gold and emerald. Salazar had hidden it behind stone, requiring Parseltongue to open. But Corvinus realized that in a world of brand new plumbing, the old entrance was dangerously exposed. He needed to move it, or rather, he needed to build a room around it. He selected a girl's bathroom on the first floor, a room that was out of the way, easily condemned, easily forgotten, and he installed a sink. Not just any sink. He forged the metal tap himself, engraving it with a tiny serpent that coiled around the handle. The spell to open it was bound entirely to Parseltongue. No water would ever flow from that pipe. It was a monument to silence, a dead end in the living network of the castle. The pipes behind that sink connected not just to the castle's drainage system, but deep down to the cavern of the chamber itself. The Basilisk, if ever awakened, could now travel through these new tunnels. The mundane act of flushing a toilet or turning a tap in any other bathroom unknowingly masked the existence of the darkest dungeon in Hogwarts. Corvinus Gaunt had turned a moment of vulnerability into the ultimate architectural shadow game. The plumbing system became the perfect camouflage. No one questions a wall of pipes. No one inspects a dry sink too closely. The trapdoor was set. The sink was dry. The bathroom was eventually condemned by later headmasters, avoided by generations of students because of the moaning ghost who took residence there many decades later. But for centuries the secret held. The Gaunt family knew. They boasted of it at the dinner table. They whispered of the sink and the serpent, passing the precise location down through the bloodline like a sacred heirloom, but they never laid a hand on it. The entrance remained untouched. Corvinus's work was perfect, so perfect, that when the Heir finally returned to Hogwarts in the 20th century, he did not have to search for the chamber. He did not have to decode ancient runes or bribe a ghost. He simply had to know the words. The entrance was waiting, pristine, exactly as Corvinus Gaunt had left it. The preservation of that secret was Corvinus's gift to his bloodline, a sealed envelope of darkness, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right set of lips to pronounce the command of opening. But the preservation of a secret guarantees a reckoning. Corvinus Gaunt believed he was fortifying a legacy, building a vault for the future. He could not have known that the heir who would eventually open that door would not be a proud guardian of the old ways, but a boy who sought to tear the entire magical world apart and burn the Gaunt's name into ash. The arrival of Tom Riddle would change the chamber from a legend into a weapon, and Corvinus's careful architecture would become the stage for the most devastating confrontation Hogwarts had ever seen. The sink was installed, the pipes laid, and Corvinus Gaunt's careful work ensured that the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets would never be stumbled upon by accident. For nearly 200 years, that hidden door beneath the second-floor girls' lavatory remained exactly where he had placed it, sealed behind stone and copper, waiting for the right voice to speak the password. And that voice would not arrive until the autumn of 1938, in the person of an 11-year-old boy who had no idea he was carrying the blood of Salazar Slytherin in his veins. Tom Marvolo Riddle arrived at Hogwarts as an orphan from Wool's Orphanage in London. He was brilliant, yes, but also deeply unusual. The staff who had watched him grow up described him as secretive, cold, and strangely powerful. Things happened around Tom that no one could explain. He had a way of making other children fear him, not because he was loud or violent, but because there was something unblinking and ancient in his gaze. When he stepped onto the Hogwarts train, he was already searching for something he could not name, a place where he belonged, a sense of power that the Muggle world had never given him. The sorting hat placed him in Slytherin almost immediately, and the moment his house's silvery green crest settled over his robes, Tom felt a quiet thrill of recognition. He had found his tribe, but he wanted more than a house. He wanted to understand why he was different, why he could speak to snakes, why the other children at the orphanage had shrunk from him. The answers, he suspected, lay in his family history. And so, even as a first year, Tom began to research. He spent long evenings in the restricted section, poring over genealogies of old wizarding families, searching for the name Riddle. But Riddle was a Muggle name, his father's name, and it led nowhere. Then, one afternoon, came across a mention of the Gaunt family, ancient pure blood line that had fallen into poverty and madness. The name Gaunt appeared in a footnote about Salazar Slytherin himself. Tom's heart began to race. He cross-referenced the Gaunt family tree with his mother's name, Merope. He had never known much about his mother, only that she had died shortly after his birth, and that his father had abandoned them. Now, in the dim light of the library, he discovered that Merope Gaunt was the last known descendant of Slytherin. The blood of the founder ran through her veins, and through her, through him, the revelation changed everything. Tom was not just a clever orphan, he was the heir of Hogwarts' most feared founder. He began to devour every scrap of information about Slytherin, about the Chamber of Secrets, about the monster that was said to sleep beneath the school. The story was treated as a myth by most students, and even some teachers. But Tom knew better. He could feel the truth in his bones, the same way he could feel the hiss of Parseltongue rising from his throat when he spoke to the snakes in the grounds. Now he needed to find the entrance. The legend said that only the true heir could open the chamber, and Tom believed he was that heir. But where was it? He searched the dungeons, running his hands over the cold stone walls, whispering the password in Parseltongue. Nothing. He read every account of the Gaunt family's boasts, and he noted that they had talked about a hidden room, a place where Slytherin serpents slumbered. The Gaunts, for all their arrogance, had never been able to open it themselves. They lacked the language, but Tom had it, and he had something else: patience. Over the course of several months, he mapped out the plumbing system of Hogwarts, using his knowledge of the castle's medieval construction and the more recent additions from Corvinus Gaunt's era. He followed the pipes that ran beneath the second-floor girls' lavatory. Remembering the old caretaker's complaint about a blocked sink that no one could fix, he listened to the whispers of the castle itself, the echoes of water and stone, and then one night he stood before that sink, with its ornate tap that no longer worked, and he spoke the words that had been dormant for 1,000 years. The sink trembled, the pipes groaned, and then the basin split open, revealing a dark, gaping chute that plunged into the depths of the earth. Tom Riddle stood at the edge, listening to the faraway slither of something massive stirring below. He had found the Chamber of Secrets. He had found his birthright, but he did not enter that night. He was too careful for that. He knew that the monster inside was not ready to be unleashed. It needed a purpose, a plan. Tom returned to the library and to the shadows, gathering allies, learning to control his Parseltongue with perfect precision, and waiting for the moment when he would be ready to strike. The discovery of the Gaunt connection had given him a name and a legacy, but it was the entrance itself that gave him power, and that power was about to be tested in ways he had not yet imagined. The events that followed would scar Hogwarts for half a century, and they would begin with a single death in a forgotten washroom. That story, the story of what happened when Tom Riddle finally unleashed the monster, is the subject of our next chapter. 1943, the first unleashing. By the time Tom Riddle stepped into Hogwarts as a first year in 1938, he already carried within him a hunger that no ordinary boy could name. He was brilliant, yes, top of every class, charming when it suited him, quiet when it served him better. But beneath that surface lay a fixed and burning purpose: to discover who he truly was, and to prove that his bloodline placed him head and shoulders above everyone else. Over the next 4 years, he pieced together the scattered and broken history of the Gaunt family, his mother's line, and through them the truth of his descent from Salazar Slytherin himself. And once he knew that, the next step became inevitable. He had to find the Chamber of Secrets. He had to open it, and he had to prove that he, and he alone, was the true heir of Slytherin. So in his 5th year, at the age of 16, Tom Riddle made his first successful attempt to open the chamber. It was not a reckless act. Every move he made was calculated, every decision designed to protect his own reputation, while the school fell into chaos. He had spent months researching the legends, cross-referencing with the books in the restricted section, and quietly following the clues that the Gaunts had left. Int whispered in drunken boasts. Fragments of Parseltongue passed down through the family. By the spring of 1943, he was ready. He crept into the girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor. The same bathroom that would one day belong to moaning Myrtle, and spoke the words that had not been uttered in centuries. In Parseltongue, he commanded the entrance to open, and the stone sink slid back, revealing the dark pipe that plunged deep into the earth. What awaited him down there was not some mindless beast. The Basilisk was a creature of immense intelligence and instinct, a serpent designed to obey only the voice of Slytherin's heir. Tom understood that he could not simply shout orders and expect the monster to do his bidding. He had to manipulate it, shape its hunting instincts, direct its ancient hatred toward the students he wanted to purge. And so begins the psychological manipulation of the Basilisk to hunt Muggle-born students. He did not unleash it all at once. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he spoke to it in Parseltongue, coaxing it from its slumber, teaching it to recognize the scent and presence of those with non-magical parents. The Basilisk was old, but it was not stupid. It remembered its purpose. Slytherin had created it to cleanse the school of those he considered unworthy. Tom Riddle simply reminded of that duty, and then gave it permission to act. The first wave of attacks began in the spring term of 1943. Students started to fall, not dead at first, but petrified. The Basilisk's gaze, when seen indirectly, did not kill. It froze its victims in a state of living stone. And that was part of Riddle's plan. He wanted fear, not just murder. He wanted the entire school, to feel the monster's presence, to whisper its name in the corridors, to glance over their shoulders as they walked past every dark corner. The atmosphere of terror that gripped the school during the first wave of attacks was thick enough to taste. Classes were cancelled. Students slept in their common rooms with wands drawn. Teachers patrolled the hallways in pairs, and yet no one could find the source. The whispers grew louder. The Heir of Slytherin has returned. The chamber has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware. And through it all, Tom Riddle walked the halls with a calm, almost pitying expression. He offered to help the staff, volunteered for patrol duty, and even wrote a letter to the governors expressing concern for the safety of the students. No one suspected him. How could they? He was a prefect, a model student, a boy who had risen from an orphanage, become the most promising wizard of his generation. But behind that mask, he was watching, he was waiting, and he was guiding the Basilisk with silent commands spoken only inside his mind. The creature did not need to hear his voice every time. It learned to recognize his will, and so the attacks continued. A Hufflepuff girl named Olive Hornby found a petrified boy near the library. A Ravenclaw student was discovered frozen in an alcove, her face twisted in horror. The hospital wing filled with stone statues. The school was paralyzed. But Riddle knew that to prove his power, he needed more than fear. He needed a death. He needed a victim that would be undeniable, a moment that would seal his legend forever. And he chose that victim carefully. A Muggle-born girl named Myrtle Warren, who had a habit of crying in the bathroom. The very bathroom that hid the entrance to the chamber. He waited until she was alone. He opened the pipe, and he commanded the Basilisk to strike. What happened in that moment, what Myrtle saw and heard and felt, is a story that deserves its own telling. It is a moment that would echo through Hogwarts for 50 years. And it begins with a girl who just wanted a moment of privacy to weep. That story, the death of Myrtle Warren, is the next chapter in the dark history of the Chamber of Secrets. And it is a chapter that Tom Riddle would never let go of. The chamber was open. The Basilisk was awake. And Tom Riddle, at 16, had become the master of a weapon of mass destruction hidden in the school's foundations. He did not simply release the Serpent to rampage. He commanded it with a specific, calculated purpose. The whispers in Parseltongue directed the creature through the labyrinth of pipes that coiled beneath Hogwarts, hunting for the targets Riddle despised most. The Muggle-born students who had no place in his vision of a pure magical world. The hunt had a singular focus, and it found its first quarry in a forgotten alcove on the second floor. Her name was Myrtle Warren, a Muggle-born student of no exceptional fame or pedigree. She was quiet, timid, prone to tears. On that June afternoon in 1943, she had fled to a disused bathroom on the second floor landing to escape a particularly cruel round of teasing. The room was rarely visited. The tiles were cracked, the mirrors were clouded, and the plumbing groaned with an almost living sound. It was a place of solitude, a refuge for the outcast. But that solitude was a double-edged sword. There were no witnesses, no one to hear a scream. While Myrtle sobbed into her arms, the water in the toilet bowl began to stir. A ripple spread across the surface. The pipes groaned louder, a deep vibration that rattled the stalls. And then, from the darkness of that ancient plumbing, two enormous yellow eyes opened and stared directly into the bathroom. Let us be precise about the mechanics of what happened next. Because the difference between survival and death in this moment was a matter of millimeters and reflexes. The Basilisk gaze is not a single weapon. It operates on a terrible binary. If a victim sees the Serpent's eyes through a lens, a reflection, or any form of indirect viewing, they are frozen in a state of petrification. They become a statue, trapped in flesh, aware but immobile, waiting for a cure that may never come, but a direct meeting of the eyes, a full, unfiltered connection between the victim's pupils and the serpents, delivers death, instant, absolute, unstoppable. Myrtle looked up at the sound of the water. She expected a prefect, a teacher, perhaps a classmate sent to retrieve her. Instead, she saw the two yellow orbs staring back at her from the tap. There was no time to be afraid, no time to scream. The basilisk magic flooded her body. In a fraction of a second, her heart stopped beating, her lungs stopped breathing. She slipped from the toilet seat and collapsed onto the cold, wet floor. The monster, its work complete, slithered back down the drain. When the other students found her body moments later, there was a terrible silence. No marks, no blood, no evidence of a struggle. It was a perfect, unexplainable death. But Myrtle Warren's life did not simply end. In a way, it transformed from a mortal tragedy into a dark immortality of its own. She became a ghost, bound to the very bathroom where she died, forever sobbing into the stalls that had been her final sanctuary. And more importantly, her death became the keystone of Tom Riddle's greatest ambition. To create a Horcrux, a fragment of a soul sealed into an object, a wizard must commit a murder. Not an accident, not a moment of passion, but a deliberate, calculated act of killing that tears the soul apart. Myrtle's death was that act. Riddle had engineered it. He had commanded the basilisk. He had chosen the target. The murder of Myrtle Warren was the precise moment. Tom Riddle fractured his own soul. That torn piece of his being was then poured into a simple black diary. The diary that would later become the first Horcrux. The anchor that allowed Lord Voldemort to cheat death for decades. The death of a lonely girl in a second-floor bathroom was not just the first casualty of the chamber. It was the ritual sacrifice that created the monster's immortality. The school, of course, did not understand any of this. They only knew a student was dead, and panic seized the castle. The governors demanded the chamber be sealed. The Ministry of Magic descended to investigate. Tom Riddle watched the chaos unfold, calculating every move. He had achieved his goal. He had opened the chamber. He had made his Horcrux. But the secret could not be allowed to emerge. He needed a scapegoat, someone to absorb the blame and close the investigation forever. He needed someone soft, someone trusting, someone whose love for dangerous creatures could be twisted into a confession. He found the perfect patsy in a kind, lumbering third year named Rubeus Hagrid. That framing was as cold and precise as the killing stroke of the basilisk itself. And we will face its full weight in the next chapter, the framing of Rubeus Hagrid, where a single act of friendship was weaponized against an innocent boy, burying the truth of the chamber for half a century. The death of Myrtle Warren was a catastrophe that demanded a culprit. The halls of Hogwarts were thick with whispered accusations and paranoid glances, a powder keg of fear in desperate need of a match. And Tom Riddle, 17 years old and brilliant beyond his years, was ready to strike. He had prepared the ground meticulously. He knew about Hagrid's secret, a giant spider, an acromantula hidden in the castle. It was a dangerous creature. Yes, an illegal creature, but it was no basilisk. It was the wrong monster entirely. But to a school board terrified by a murder on their watch, any monster would do. Riddle's calculated move to blame the attacks on Hagrid and his pet spider, Aragog, was a masterclass in misdirection. He waited until the panic was at its absolute peak, when the governors were desperate for an answer they could understand. He went to the headmaster, playing the part of the reluctant informant, the broken-hearted friend forced to speak a terrible truth. The name Aragog hit the assembled school governors like a curse, a massive spider raised in the castle by the gamekeeper himself. The timing was perfect. How could they not believe it? The boy who had uncovered the truth had just lost a fellow student to this mysterious violence. He was credible, he was sorrowful, he was a hero in the making. They never questioned how a third-year boy could have discovered something the greatest minds of the age had missed for a millennium. The school governors, terrified parents demanding justice from the ministry, were satisfied with a scapegoat. They did not want a complex investigation into dark magic or the subtleties of Parseltongue. They wanted a name, a face, a monster they could expel from their midst and present to the public. They closed the case with indecent haste, allowing the real killer to escape with his reputation not just intact, but polished to a golden shine. The consequence of this verdict was violent and absolute. The expulsion of Hagrid and the tragic destruction of his wand was carried out as a public spectacle. A ministry official performed the official snapping on the front steps of the castle. The sharp crack of holly and phoenix feather breaking echoed through the courtyard. To break a wizard's wand is to sever their soul from their entire world. Hagrid was only a third-year student. He was expelled, forbidden from ever completing his education, forbidden from legally performing magic ever again. He was condemned to a lifetime of manual labour, an outcast on the very grounds he loved, forced to watch other students learn the craft that had been stolen from him. It is a profound and enduring tragedy. He became a martyr to a lie, punished for a crime committed by the very boy who stood before the school and accepted their applause. He was too trusting, too gentle, and too different to be believed. But Albus Dumbledore, in a small act of quiet rebellion against the injustice, allowed Hagrid to keep the broken pieces of his wand. They were too damaged to work properly, of course, but later they were hidden within the shaft of a pink umbrella, a sad magical crutch for a wizard who had been robbed of his birthright, a constant, splintered reminder of what was stolen from him. Tom Riddle, meanwhile, was awarded the Medal of Special Services for the school. He had orchestrated a murder, framed an innocent boy, and been celebrated for it. The Chamber of Secrets had served its purpose for him. He had secured his legacy at Hogwarts, his influence untouchable. He had removed the threat, and in doing so, he had secured the loyalty of those who would later become his first followers. The school settled back into its rhythm after the verdict. The doors to the chamber remained sealed beneath the dungeons. The Basilisk, its ancient hunger for blood briefly sated, sank back into its 1,000-year slumber deep beneath the dark waters of the lake. The secret was buried. For 50 years, the monster dreamed in the dark. The truth rotted in the silence, condemned by those who chose the easy lie over the complex reality. What followed was the longest period of quiet in the history of the chamber, a half-century of false peace where the castle assumed the monster was a myth, and the only one who knew the full truth was the broken young man tending the grounds, forbidden from ever speaking the name of the spider aloud. This stretch of silence, this dormancy period, would eventually be broken, but only when a new voice, carrying the same blood, found the diary that had been left behind as a trap. The monster was not dead, it was only waiting. Rubeus Hagrid was gone, his wand snapped, his name forever stained with a crime he did not commit. Tom Riddle had won absolute victory. The monster had been silenced publicly, and the convenient culprit delivered to the headmaster's office on a silver platter. But a 90-foot basilisk cannot simply vanish without a trace, and a legacy of terror cannot be allowed to cripple the very institution a young Dark Lord intended to inherit. Riddle understood something crucial that so many dark wizards fail to grasp. There is no point in ruling over ashes. If he allowed the chamber to remain active, if the attacks continued, Hogwarts would have closed. It was the most certain outcome. The governors were already panicking. The school was hemorrhaging students. A permanent closure meant no Tom Riddle as head boy, no access to the restricted section, no network of future Death Eaters to cultivate. The chamber had served its purpose for 1943. It eliminated Myrtle Warren, a target of convenience whose sacrifice paid off spectacularly. It solidified Riddle's reputation as the hero, the saviour of the school. More than that, it gave him a hostage. He could hold the survival of the entire castle in his hands. By withdrawing the Basilisk, he proved his loyalty, his reliability in a crisis. Headmaster Dippet was indebted to him. The governors were impressed. Riddle had to close the box, lock the monster away, and collect his reward. He was playing the long game, and the school would live. One day, it would be his. So in the dead of night, after the final inquisition into Hagrid's guilt, Tom Riddle stood before the great stone face of Salazar Slytherin once more. The air in the chamber was thick with the copper tang of fresh blood and the cold, dry exhalation of deep earth. He spoke in Parseltongue. The command was not just a word, but an imposition of absolute will. The Basilisk, a creature of pure instinct and malice, had tasted the freedom of the hunt. To return it to its cage was a defiance of its very nature. Yet the bond of the hare was absolute. The massive serpent, her scales absorbing the dim torchlight, slowly began to retreat. Behind the looming statue of Slytherin, a great fissure opens into the darkness. The basilisk did not slither so much as pour itself back into the deep, coiling down into the subterranean reservoir, a lake of pitch-black water that had lain still for 1,000 years. The heavy tail, thicker than an ancient oak, scraped against the stone pillars until it finally disappeared into the abyss. The water accepted her weight with barely a ripple, and then came the silence, the profound absolute silence of a tomb. The stone mouth of Slytherin's statue closed, sealing the passage. The real monster was returned to her deep sleep behind the statue of Salazar, and then the years did what years do. They eroded the sharp edges of the tragedy. Myrtle Warren became just a sad tale, the ghost who haunted the girls' lavatory. Hagrid's expulsion was a dusty footnote in the disciplinary records. The whispers of a monster became a cautionary tale for naughty first years. A dark myth passed down in the Slytherin common room. Who knows what lies beneath? The older students would murmur, but no one knew the truth. For 50 years, the creature slumbered. It did not age the way other creatures do. It was a dark artifact of Salazar's own making, a perfect predator waiting in amber. Time passed over the castle, and its deepest secret remained a passive threat, a loaded weapon locked in a sealed vault. No one searched for it. No one dared believe in it. The memory of the true hare faded, becoming a ghost story itself. The silence of the chamber was absolute. The pipes behind the walls carried the sounds students laughing and fighting and growing up. But they carried no echo of the serpent. The entrance became invisible, a fixture of the plumbing that everyone walked past without a second glance. The castle's deepest terror had become a legend, a dormant nightmare that no one truly expected to wake. Riddle did not simply wait. He used the peace he had purchased. He became prefect and head boy. He vanished for a time to pursue objects of power, to study the deepest secrets of magic. He killed his father and framed his uncle. He pursued the creation of Horcruxes. He applied for the defense against the Dark Arts post and was denied. And then he disappeared into the wider world, building an empire of terror. But he never forgot the weapon he left behind. And that is the insidious nature of the Dormancy Period. The Basilisk was waiting, but it was not forgotten. It was simply held in reserve, a perfect ace hidden under the table for half a century. The school learned to stop fearing the unknown. The attacks of 1943 became a closed chapter, a dark myth, nothing more, but seeds grow in darkness. Tom Riddle understood that even a sealed chamber cannot hold a true inheritor at bay forever. he had already taken steps to ensure his return. A vessel of malice that would not wait patiently for a hair to speak the ancient tongue. That vessel was his diary, a Horcrux disguised as a memory. It would not need the stone mouth of Slytherin to open. It would find its own way to speak, and its name was Tom Marvolo Riddle. After the Basilisk had been returned to its slumber, and the body of Myrtle Warren had been discovered in the flooded bathroom, Tom Riddle knew his work at Hogwarts was not yet complete. He had opened the chamber, unleashed the monster, and claimed a victim, but the school had come too close to shutting down, and his cover, his perfect schoolboy persona, was too valuable to risk further, so he closed the chamber again, letting the whispers of a dead student fade into a settled mystery. Yet even as he walked the corridors, smiling at professors and charming his peers, a deeper, far more dangerous project was already taking root inside his mind. Tom Riddle was 16 years old, and he had already begun to solve the riddle of immortality. He had always been different, even among the magical. He did not fear death like other children. He saw it as a weakness to be conquered, and he had learned, through his own dark studies and the whispers of ancient texts, that there were ways to tear a soul apart and anchor a piece of it to the world. The diary was never meant to be a simple record of his year at Hogwarts. It was a vessel, a container designed to hold his 16-year-old self, his memories, his cunning, his ambition, and his malice, intact and undimmed long after the original Tom Riddle had moved on. How did he do it? First, he needed an object with enough emotional resonance to act as a stable container. A plain Muggle diary, bought from a stationer's shop, was ironically perfect. It was unremarkable, easy to pass along, and it would never be suspected of holding a fragment of a soul. He then performed a dark ritual, one that required a murder to split his soul. He chose to save that moment of killing Myrtle Warren, of taking her life, and he used that death to power the enchantment. In that instant, he pushed a part of his own soul into the diary's pages. The diary became a Horcrux, one of the first he would ever create, and it now contained the imprint of Tom Riddle at 16, his charisma, his intelligence, his hatred of Muggle-borns, and his absolute commitment to finishing what Salazar Slytherin had begun. The diary's purpose was not merely to preserve a memory. It was a weapon designed to finish Salazar Slytherin's noble work of purging Hogwarts of those unworthy of magic. Riddle understood that he could not simply leave the Basilisk asleep forever. He needed an heir to open the chamber again, but he also needed to ensure that the chamber could be opened when he was no longer at the school. The diary then was a trap. It would lie dormant, waiting for someone to write in it. A vulnerable soul, perhaps a young student with access to the school, someone who would pour out their fears and secrets. The diary would then begin to drain that person's life force, using it to grow stronger, and eventually it would use that host to open the chamber once more. It was a delayed curse, a time bomb of Parseltongue, Malice, and Serpent venom, carefully hidden in plain sight among the belongings of a Hogwarts student. But that plan did not come to fruition for nearly 5 decades. After leaving Hogwarts, Tom Riddle transformed into Lord Voldemort, building an army and waging war on the magical world. The diary remained in his possession, a precious artifact that contained a piece of his youth. Yet during the chaos of the First Wizarding War, when he was at the height of his power, Voldemort made a fateful decision. He entrusted the diary to one of his most loyal followers, Lucius Malfoy. The reason was simple. Malfoy was a prominent, wealthy pureblood who moved easily through high society. He could hold the diary safely, keep it secret, and perhaps, if the need arose, use it as a weapon. But Voldemort never told Malfoy its true nature. He simply said it was a valuable dark artifact, something to be protected until the Dark Lord returned. And so the diary travelled from the hands of the most dangerous wizard, alive into the marble halls of Malfoy Manor. It sat in Lucius Malfoy's private vault, a quiet testament to his master's trust, while the First Wizarding War raged and ended. When Voldemort fell on that Halloween night in 1981, the diary's purpose seemed lost. Lucius Malfoy, ever the pragmatist, saw an opportunity. He could use this old dark artifact not to serve a fallen master, but to advance his own agenda within the ministry. He bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to slip the diary into the hands of someone who could cause the most chaos at Hogwarts. That moment would come in 1992, when a young girl named Ginny Weasley was sent off to her first year at school. An innocent, trusting and lonely child, carrying a trunk that contained the seeds of destruction. The diary had found its way into her belongings, planted by Lucius Malfoy with a smile and a lie, and as she opened its pages and began to write, something ancient and terrible stirred in the depths of the castle, waiting for the heir of Slytherin to speak again. That story, the story of how a simple diary almost brought Hogwarts to its knees, and how Lucius Malfoy's conspiracy set the stage for the second unleashing of the chamber, is what we will uncover in our next chapter. The diary Tom Riddle created was not merely a trophy of his past crimes, nor simply a vessel of malice. It was a weapon waiting for the right hand to wield it. For nearly 50 years, it remained in the shadows, passing from the dark wizard who created it into the keeping of his most loyal follower. By the early 1990s, that weapon rested in the possession of Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy had spent the years since the Dark Lord's fall carefully navigating the treacherous waters of a world where his master was no longer the supreme power. He had whispered his way back into favour, claimed the imperious curse had clouded his mind, and used his vast wealth to maintain his place in society. But Lucius had not abandoned his beliefs. He merely waited for the opportunity to strike against those he despised most, and among those, there was perhaps no family he hated more than the Weasleys. Arthur Weasley represented everything Lucius found contemptible. A blood traitor, a man obsessed with muggles, an embarrassment to wizardkind who squandered his talents on enchanted muggle objects and ridiculous muggle inventions. Worse, Arthur was actively working against the old pure-blood establishment. His position at the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office was a joke, but his political influence was growing. The Muggle Protection Act, which Arthur championed, threatened to bring even stricter oversight into the homes and shops of families like the Malfoys. If Arthur Weasley gained too much power, the raids on dark artifacts would only intensify. Lucius could not allow this. But Arthur Weasley was not the only target. The true obstacle to Lucius's vision for the wizarding world was Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore stood as the great guardian of Hogwarts, a bulwark against the rising tide of pure-blood supremacy. As long as Dumbledore remained headmaster, the old ways could never fully return. He protected Muggle-borns, championed half-bloods, and kept the school as a place of unity rather than segregation. The Malfoy family held a long-standing grudge against Dumbledore, dating back to the First War. Removing him from Hogwarts was a political objective that rivaled the discrediting of Arthur Weasley himself. So Lucius devised a plan that was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. He would take the diary he had kept hidden for years and plant it on Arthur Weasley's youngest daughter. Ginny Weasley, a first-year student, innocent and trusting, would become the unwitting instrument of her father's destruction. The diary was not merely a dark object, it was a piece of Tom Riddle's soul. Lucius understood that the diary was dangerous, but he believed it was simply a cursed artifact, a relic of the old regime. He did not fully grasp that it was a Horcrux, a container for a living fragment of the Dark Lord himself. To Lucius, it was a weapon he could aim at his enemies. Let the Weasley girl take it to Hogwarts. Let the beast inside the chamber stir once more. Let Dumbledore fail to protect his students. The consequences would ripple outward in exactly the way Lucius intended. The Board of Governors, which Lucius heavily influenced, would have no choice but to demand Dumbledore's removal. The families of the petrified students would cry out for justice. Arthur Weasley, the father of the girl who brought the danger into the school, would be utterly disgraced. His political career would end. He would spend his remaining years trying to explain how his own daughter had become the vessel of the darkest magic the school had seen in a century. It was a perfect scheme, but it contained within it a flaw that Lucius never anticipated. By bringing the diary back to Hogwarts, Lucius did not simply unleash a monster. He brought the memory of Tom Riddle, the place where the Dark Lord had first discovered his power. The diary did not merely possess Ginny Weasley, it awakened the 16-year-old version of the wizard who would become Lord Voldemort, found himself alive again, with a voice and a will of his own. And this memory had no loyalty to Lucius Malfoy. The memory of Tom Riddle had a single goal: to complete the work he had begun in 1943, to open the Chamber of Secrets, to purge Hogwarts of the unworthy, and to use the life force of Ginny Weasley to make himself whole again. Lucius had gambled that the diary was simply a tool. He did not realize he was handing the keys of the castle back to the Dark Lord himself. The unintended consequence of his conspiracy was not just the chaos at Hogwarts, but the reawakening of a consciousness that would ultimately threaten the very foundations of the world Lucius was trying to build. By trying to destroy his enemies through a weapon he did not fully understand, Lucius Malfoy set in motion a chain of events that would bring the wrath of the Dark Lord's memory upon the school and would ultimately lead to the diary's destruction. In the end, Lucius got his wish. Dumbledore was suspended. Arthur Weasley came under intense scrutiny, but the victory was hollow. The price of his scheme was the near death of an innocent girl and the return of a nightmare that should have stayed buried in the depths of the castle. The memory of Tom Riddle was loose in the halls of Hogwarts, and only a select few would be able to stop it. The story now descends deeper into the darkness of the diary. The voice in the pages had found its host, and the girl who carried the book was no longer alone in her own mind. The possession of Ginny Weasley would prove to be one of the most harrowing ordeals Hogwarts had ever seen, because the monster inside the diary was hungry, and it knew exactly how to feed. Lucius Malfoy believed he had committed the perfect act of sabotage by slipping the diary into Ginny Weasley's cauldron. At Flourish and Blots, he planted a dark artifact within the very heart of the family that opposed him. It was a calculated strike against Arthur Weasley, and by extension, against Albus Dumbledore. Yet in his arrogance, Lucius never truly understood the nature of the weapon he was handling. He knew it was dark. He knew it could cause trouble, but he had no idea it contained a piece of a soul. And so, without a shred of malice toward the girl herself, he handed the most dangerous object in the school to a shy, impressionable 11-year-old child. The diary did not simply sit in her trunk. It called to her. Ginny Weasley, desperate for a confidant in the intimidating shadow of her brothers and the strangeness of a magical castle she barely understood, opened it, and she began to write. This is where the tragedy deepens into something truly sinister. The diary did not just listen, it answered. Tom Riddle, the memory preserved within its pages, presented himself as the perfect friend. He was charming, understanding, and deeply interested in her secrets. But this friendship was a trap. What Ginny experienced over the following weeks was the slow, parasitic drain of her life force. Tom Riddle needed her emotional energy, her magic, her very vitality to grow strong enough to act in the physical world. Every secret she poured in, every tear she shed, was fuel for his slow resurrection. Ginny began to fade. She grew paler, thinner, and quieter. Her nervousness, once endearing quirk, became a haunting lethargy. She looked like a flower left too long in the dark, deprived of the sun. Her life was being siphoned away, drop by drop, word by word. She was the host, and the memory of Tom Riddle was a parasite, feasting on her youth and innocence, growing fat on her life, while she withered into a mere shadow of the girl she had been just weeks before. But the drain of her strength was not enough. Tom needed a body, or at least a puppet. He needed to walk the halls and unleash the monster. And this is where the horror of the possession truly took hold. Ginny began experiencing blackouts. She would wake in strange parts of the castle, with no memory of how she got there. Her hands would be stained with ink, or worse, with dust and damp from the plumbing. She knew something was happening inside her, but she could not stop it. She could not tell anyone, because who would believe that a diary was stealing her identity? Who would believe that the shyest Weasley was the dark force haunting the corridors? The blackouts culminated in the first message left for the school. Tom Riddle used her voice, her hand, her body as a vessel. He wrote the words upon the wall, not with paint, but with a substance far more ominous, a reflection of the violence he intended to commit. The words dripped in a garish warning to the Muggle-born students. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the hair, beware. For Ginny, this was a total loss of self. The school was panicking. Professors were investigating, and she was the cause, yet she held no memory of the act. The guilt was a poison running in tandem with her physical exhaustion. She could not look her brothers in the eye. She could barely stand the weight of her own reflection. But the deepest wound, the psychological trauma that would scar her far longer than the fading of her strength, was yet to come. Tom Riddle did not merely want to write messages. He wanted to finish what he started 50 years ago. He wanted to kill. Ginny was forced to become the heir of Slytherin in the most literal and terrifying sense. It was her body that opened the chamber. It was her throat, shaped by the Parseltongue, planted in her mind by the diary, that gave the command to the Basilisk. She was present. In a way, when the Great Serpent stirred from its 1,000-year slumber, she felt the slithering in her mind. She was the key that turned the lock on the dungeon of horrors. Imagine the psychological fracture this creates in a young girl. She is not a dark witch. She is a puppet made of flesh and blood. Every petrification, every near miss, is a dagger of guilt she cannot deflect, because she cannot fully separate her own unconscious self from the actions of the monster. She writes frantically in the diary, confessing her terror, begging it to stop. But of course, the diary is not her confessor. The diary is the jailer. The more she confesses, the stronger the jailer becomes. She is trapped in a cycle of fear, exhaustion, and despair, with no way out and no one to turn to. The very magic she trusted, her secret diary, was the anchor dragging her to the bottom of a very dark ocean, and the surface was getting further and further away. And so the first weeks of the autumn term passed in a haze of fever and fear for Ginny Weasley, while Harry fought his silent battles with the Parseltongue he could not explain, and Hermione chased leads through dusty books in the restricted section. Ginny was fighting a war inside her own mind, a war she was losing. The nightmare that had been crawling just beneath the surface of Hogwarts was about to break through. The whispers in the corridors would soon be drowned out by a scream. For Ginny, the loss of control was almost complete. The creature was loose. The school was hunting for answers. And the shadow of the Hire was stretching long over the castle. The terror becomes tangible for everyone, when a silent witness is found hanging from a torch bracket, her body frozen solid and rigid with fear. The threat stops being a theory and becomes a very real, very petrified reality. Up next is Chapter 21, The First Attack Misses. Norris, a moment that transforms Hogwarts from a school of magic into a castle of suspicion and dread. The diary was winning. The slow parasitic drain of Ginny Weasley's life force had reached a critical threshold, and the wall beside the entrance to the Great Hall bore the crimson evidence of her struggle. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened. The whisper of the Heir of Slytherin was no longer a cold rumour passed between dormitories. It was a written threat dripping down the stone. And in this atmosphere of creeping dread, the school gathered for the Halloween feast, unaware that they were walking into the first act of a very real horror. The Halloween feast and the discovery of the petrified cat are bound together as the single moment where the old legend finally broke the surface of everyday life. The Great Hall was alive, with the flutter of enchanted bats and the warm, flickering glow of floating pumpkins. It was supposed to be an evening of comfort and escape from the weight of approaching exams and the darker whispers that had haunted the corridors since the start of term. But the escape lasted only as long as the laughter. As the students filtered out of the hall, full and heavy-eyed, a scream tore through the corridor. It was Argus Filch. His voice, usually a threatening snarl that echoed through the stone, had fractured into a high and terrible wail that no one in that crowd would ever forget. The students gathered quickly around the torch bracket on the cold wall. Hanging there by her tail, stiff as a board, her fur standing on end, was Mrs. Norris, his cat. She was petrified, her eyes wide and unseeing, frozen in a silent scream of her own. In that single, terrible moment, the legend of the Heir of Slytherin ceased to be a dusty story. It became a living, breathing terror standing in the very heart of Hogwarts. And the suspicion in the air shifted instantly toward the most convenient target. But to truly understand the nature of this attack, we have to look down at a detail that is almost too easy to overlook: the water on the floor. Beneath the spot where Mrs. Norris hung suspended, a distinct puddle had formed on the flagstones. It was no ordinary splash from a student's pumpkin juice. It was the key to understanding the monster itself. The creature hiding within the walls is a basilisk, a serpent whose gaze is the most absolute weapon in the magical world. A direct look means instant death. This was the fate of Myrtle Warren 50 years prior. But an indirect look changes everything. A glance through a reflection does not kill. It petrifies. It freezes the victim in a state of perfect suspension between life and death, locking their consciousness inside a stone shell. Mrs. Norris did not see the serpent's eye with her own. She saw the reflection of that yellow, terrible stare in the shallow water pooled on the stone floor. That thin, overlooked puddle was the boundary between life and extinction. It is the only reason she survived, locked in rigid stone instead of being reduced to nothing. The water on the floor tells us exactly how the monster hunts. It moves through the pipes and the damp foundations of the castle, using water as its medium, and when it strikes, it does not need to be seen to kill. Its victim only needs to see it wrong. A glance through a reflection, a stray tear in a puddle, means a frozen nightmare instead of a corpse. The petrification of Mrs. Norris shattered every pretense of normalcy that the school had been trying to maintain. The resurgence of the Heir of Slytherin legend among the student body was immediate and overwhelming. The whispers in the common rooms turned into frantic debates over breakfast and dinner. The old story of Salazar Slytherin's hidden monster, long dismissed as a children's fable, became the central text of every conversation in every corridor. Fingers were pointed with increasing desperation. The four houses turned against each other. The fragile unity of the feast was completely forgotten, replaced by raw suspicion, and that suspicion, fed by a grief-stricken caretaker who had lost his only companion and a professor who saw a political opportunity, found its target quickly. Not the true heir, but the one who could speak the language of the serpent, the boy who had survived the Dark Lord, now standing accused of being his spiritual successor. The whispered accusation of being the Heir of Slytherin followed Harry Potter down every corridor from that night forward. The evidence, though entirely circumstantial, felt damning to the terrified students and faculty. There was a single undeniable link between the boy who lived and the ancient enemy of Gryffindor. That link was the Serpent's tongue. How that secret was exposed, the public accusation that followed, and the bitter confrontation that shattered Harry's reputation among his own peers, is the specific terror of our next chapter. This leads us directly to the Parseltongue Reveal, where the darkest assumptions of the school find their mark, and the question of who the true heir really is becomes a battle fought with words and suspicion, long before any sword is drawn into the dark. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. Petrification of Mrs. Norris had frozen more than just the caretaker's cat. It crystallized a deep, humming terror within the stone corridors of Hogwarts. Halloween had ended not with the laughter of a feast, but with the chilling discovery that something was loose in the school. Something ancient and invisible that preyed upon the vulnerable under the cover of darkness. The fingers of suspicion began to point in every direction, and one of those fingers inevitably turned toward Harry Potter. The whispers that followed him in the weeks after that night were not the usual murmurs of celebrity. They carried a different weight, a darker inflection. He had been found at the scene of the crime, covered in paint and claiming to have seen the shape of a monstrous thing. But the school operated on rumour, not proof, and the rumour was that Harry Potter was somehow at the centre of it. The faculty was divided, the students were uneasy, and the trio, Harry, Ron and Hermione, were no closer to understanding the nature of the monster or the identity of the Heir. Into this simmering atmosphere of distrust, the school sought distraction. Gilderoy Lockhart, never one to miss an opportunity for spectacle, announced the formation of a dueling club. The intention was simple: to teach the students self-defense against the unknown. The execution, predictably, was a disaster. Lockhart mismatched himself against Professor Snape in a demonstration that lasted a mere flash of light. Snape disarmed him, sending him sprawling, and the students realised just how hollow the defence professor's boasts truly were. To salvage the evening, Lockhart suggested a student exhibition, a duel between Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy. The crowd formed a circle, wands were raised, and for a brief moment it felt like real duelling. Harry moved first, his spell a red flash that ripped the wand from Malfoy's hand. But Malfoy, ever the cheat, had not come unarmed. From the dirt at his feet a serpent rose, a long, thick black snake that twisted its way through the dust, locking its eyes on Justin Finch Fletchley, a Hufflepuff boy who had been watching from the edge of the ring. The snake prepared to strike. Harry acted on pure instinct. He lunged forward, not with a spell but with a shout. A terrible, guttural, sibilant sound poured out of his mouth. Words the crowd could not understand, but the snake could. The serpent stopped. It dropped its head and coiled submissively at Harry's feet. The chamber fell into a profound, absolute silence. Then the horror set in. Every person in that room understood what they had just heard. It was not a spell. It was a language. The language of serpents. Parseltongue. The students recoiled as if Harry himself had grown fangs. Ron and Hermione stood frozen, their faces drained of colour. Justin Finch Fletchley, the boy Harry had just saved, turned and fled the room as though he had seen the monster itself. The word escaped someone's lips, a whisper that grew into a chorus. The historical weight of that word crushed the room. In the wizarding world, Parseltongue is not a skill you learn. It is a mark of blood, a hereditary gift that runs through the line of Salazar Slytherin and only the darkest of families. The last known Parselmouth of any great power was Lord Voldemort. The logic was inescapable to the terrified minds of the students. If Harry could speak to snakes, he must be connected to the snake. He must be the heir of Slytherin. The evidence turned its face toward him, and the whispers became accusations. Back in Gryffindor Tower, Harry wrestled alone with the meaning of the incident. He did not understand how the language came to him. It simply surfaced unbidden in moments of pure instinct. Ron and Hermione stood beside him, but even their loyalty could not mask the questions burning in their eyes. Harry had no answer. For the first time, he feared not the monster beneath the school, but the shadow he carried within himself. The connection to the Dark Lord felt less like a scar and more like a chain, drawing him toward a fate he could not control. The school had found its suspect, and Harry had found his deepest doubt. The incident at the dueling club shattered any illusion of normalcy that remained. Harry retreated into isolation, but the creature in the walls did not rest. It was waiting for the moment. The school's attention wavered, and soon the whispers would turn to screams as the petrifications escalate. The first target had been a cat, hidden in the dark of a torch-lit hall. The next would be a student, caught in plain sight, and the name of the heir would be spoken in terror rather than suspicion. The dueling club had barely cleared out when the whispers began. Not just about the snake that had answered Harry Potter on the platform, but about the boy himself, a Parselmouth. The ability to speak to serpents was not a common gift. It was a dark mark in the eyes of the wizarding world, a stain that had followed Salazar Slytherin's bloodline for centuries. And now, here was Harry, a boy who had already survived the killing curse, standing before half the school and hissing at a conjured snake. The suspicion that had simmered since Halloween now boiled over. But the real storm was still gathering beneath the castle, and it was about to break with a fury that would leave 3 more victims frozen in stone. The first attack came on the morning of December 13th. Colin Creevey, the tiny first-year Gryffindor with an obsessive love for photography, had been found in the entrance hall, lying rigid as a statue, his camera shattered beside him. His eyes were wide open, caught in a moment of terror, but he was not dead, only petrified. The indirect gaze had saved him, just as it had saved Mrs. Norris. Someone, or something, had seen him first, and Colin had only caught the reflection of its eyes, perhaps through the lens of his camera, or in a puddle of water, or the polished stone of a pillar. Luck had intervened, but it would not become a pattern. A few days later, on December the 17th, Justin Finch Fletchley, a Hufflepuff first year, was found near the library, also petrified. Beside him lay nearly headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor Tower, rendered not dead but frozen, his translucent form now a solid smoky grey. A ghost cannot be killed a second time, but the basilisk's gaze had caught him in its path, and he was now as immobile as any living victim. 2 attacks in one incident, but again no deaths. Why? The answer lay in the nature of the sightings. Justin had heard something in the corridor. He had turned, and the basilisk's eyes had met his directly through a gap in a suit of armour. But the armour itself was polished, a reflection, and nearly headless Nick, being a ghost, had no living eyes to fully meet the monster's stare. His translucent form absorbed only the indirect dread. The monster had been there, moving through the pipes that snaked through the castle's walls. But it had not yet found a victim who looked it straight in the eyes. Without some barrier, the school erupted in panic. Professor McGonagall announced that all students must be escorted to their classes by teachers. Quidditch was cancelled. The corridors emptied after dark, and a curfew was enforced with the rigidity of a military lockdown. But the attacks continued in the silence of the night, and suspicion turned to Harry with a weight that pressed on his shoulders like a physical force. It was in the midst of this fear that Hermione Granger, sitting in the library with her nose buried in a mouldy tome on medieval architecture, made the connection that would crack the mystery wide open. She had been reading about the castle's plumbing, of all things, how the original founders had built the structure long before indoor plumbing was common, and how later wizards had retrofitted pipes and drainage into the existing stone. And as she traced the lines of a diagram, she noticed something. Pattern. The victims had all been found near water misses. Norris in the pool of water on the floor, Colin near the entrance hall's fountain, Justin and Nick near the library's lavatory. And then she remembered something Harry had said. He heard a voice in the walls, a hissing voice that only he could understand, a voice in the pipes, a serpent. Hermione slammed the book shut. She knew the monster was not a ghost or a creature that walked the corridors. It moved through the plumbing. The pipes were its tunnels, and if it could travel through them, then the Chamber of Secrets must be connected to the entire network of the castle. She wrote a note in haste, folding it into a tight square, and decided to tell Harry and Ron the moment she saw them. But before she could, something else happened. Something that forced her to put her discovery on hold. It was the evening of the winter solstice, the darkest night of the year. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were sitting in the common room, watching the fire crackle, when the portrait hole swung open and Percy Weasley stumbled in, white as the snow falling outside. "Another attack," he whispered. "This time, a student." But it was not a student, it was Hermione herself. She had gone to the library alone to confirm her theory. And there in the silent stacks, she had come face to face with something gleaming in the torchlight. She had only looked through the corner of her eye, a reflection in a glass case. But the basilisk's stare had still caught her. She fell, frozen, her hand still clutching the note about pipes and serpents. Harry and Ron found her later, lying stiff beside a shattered mirror. In her other hand, she had ripped a page from a book, a page about basilisks. The word pipes was underlined 3 times, and in that moment, the truth became clear, even as the horror of her condition settled over them like a funeral shroud. The monster was a serpent that rode the castle's veins of water, and it answered only to the air. But why was it targeting Muggleborns? And who was pulling the strings from inside the walls? The answer was waiting, oiled in the darkness of a forgotten chamber. But Harry would need more than luck to find it. He would need to follow a trail of fear, a whisper in the pipes, and a clue that had been staring him in the face since the day he arrived. The Forbidden Forest held secrets that even the most daring students had never dared to uncover. And the next chapter would take us there, into the heart of the ancient wood, where the first clue to the monster's true identity lay buried beneath centuries of shadow. The petrifications had thrown Hogwarts into a state of siege. The ghosts refused to hold their usual feasts. Students moved only in groups of 6 or more, and the constant shadow of suspicion hung heavy around Harry Potter than ever before. With the Polyjuice potion having failed to reveal Malfoy's secret, the only path forward came from a desperate whisper: follow the spiders. And so, on a night thick with the promise of rain, They broke the rules one final time. They followed the spiders into the forbidden forest. The moment the tree line swallowed them, the world of the castle, warm light, bustling corridors, the smell of dinner felt like a distant memory. They were in the domain of something older and far less forgiving. The spiders led them deeper. Not the tiny household ones you find in a bath. These were thick, dark, scurrying things, moving with a single-minded purpose. Ron, suffering from a deeply rational fear of arachnids, had to summon every ounce of courage just to keep walking. The forest grew darker, the air grew colder, and then the trees parted. They found themselves in a vast, bowl-shaped hollow. The ground was thick with webs, and the shadows were moving. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Giant acromantulae, the size of small elephants, their pincers clacking together like castanets made of bone. From the centre of this nightmare emerged Aragog, ancient, blind and enormous. His voice was a dry rustle, like wind through dead leaves. He remembered Hagrid. He trusted Hagrid. And because Hagrid had asked him, he would tell them the truth. Aragog spoke of a secret he had carried for 50 years. Harry and Ron stood frozen as the giant spider told them the story. Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets. He was a good boy, a kind boy. He was expelled because they found me, but he never unleashed the monster. The truth about the 1943 attacks finally clicked into place. Tom Riddle had framed him. Riddle had found Aragog, a young acromantula, and used Spider's existence to point the finger of blame away from himself. But the true culprit, the creature that actually haunted the school, was something far older. Aragog would not speak its name. He was terrified of it. The thing that lives in the castle, he hissed, is a creature of ancient fear, a thing that spiders fear above all others. I have never named it, but he described it, a giant serpent, a creature that could kill with a look, a monster that had roamed the school in Riddle's time, leaving a trail of terror. Harry understood then. It wasn't a werewolf, or a dragon, or a magical beast that could be tamed. The monster in the chamber was a basilisk. This confirmation was a double-edged sword. On one hand, Harry and Ron now knew exactly what they were hunting. The attacks of 1943 were the work of a basilisk, and Hagrid was innocent. The weight of that knowledge, the proof that Hagrid was not a monster, but a victim of circumstance, was a powerful vindication, but the implication was far more terrifying. A basilisk, a serpent king, a creature whose very gaze was a death sentence. If you looked it directly in the eye, you died. If you saw it indirectly, through a reflection or a lens, you were petrified. Before they could process this, the atmosphere shifted. Aragog, bound by his debt to Hagrid, had given them their answers. But his family, the younger acromantulae circling them, had no such obligation. They had no loyalty to a human boy. They were hungry. Go, Aragog said, before my children mistake you for prey. And then the forest floor erupted. They ran not as heroes but as prey, weaving between giant legs, dodging venomous pincers, knowing they could not outrun this many enemies, until a flash of emerald light, the Weasleys' enchanted Ford Anglia, burst through the undergrowth. It had been living wild in the forest, but it had not forgotten its loyalty to Ron. The door swung open, and they threw themselves inside. Gasping for breath, covered in mud and scratches, the Anglia soared over the dark tree line. They had their answer. The monster was a basilisk. Hagrid was innocent, but the real horror was just dawning on them. As the wind whipped through the broken windows, the realization struck. Basilisk was moving through the castle. It wasn't hiding in some distant cave in the Highlands. It was travelling through the very bones of Hogwarts. How? Through the plumbing. Think about it. Moaning Myrtle flooded her bathroom every time she had a tantrum. The water on the floor when Mrs. Norris was attacked. The dark, wide pipes of a 1,000-year-old castle leading to every single sink and toilet. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets was not in some distant dungeon vault. It was closer than they ever imagined. It was hidden in plain sight, in the one place every student passed every single day. The entrance was in the girls' bathroom on the first floor, the very room where 50 years ago, a girl named Myrtle Warren had died. Harry and Ron now possessed a truth that had been buried for decades. They knew the monster was a basilisk. They knew Hagrid was innocent, and they had a strong suspicion where the chamber was. But knowing the way in is not the same as surviving the journey. The mystery was solved. The real fight was just beginning. Join us in the next chapter, the descent into the pipes, as Harry and Ron prepare for the most perilous journey a student could ever take. Not into a dungeon, but directly into the veins of Hogwarts itself, following the trail of the Serpent into the darkness below. The revelation in the Forbidden Forest left Harry and Ron standing in the shadow of an impossible truth. The monster was not Aragog, but something older, born from the very bedrock of Hogwarts itself. A basilisk, an ancient enemy of the arachnid world, and a weapon forged in the bitter rage of Salazar Slytherin. Aragog had given them the missing piece. The first victim did not die in a corridor or a classroom. She died in a place no one dared to dwell on for long. The abandoned girls' lavatory on the first floor, moaning Myrtle's bathroom, had always been a place of echoes. The sound of weeping bouncing off the cold porcelain, the perpetual gloom of a room soaked in a tragedy that had seeped into the very grout. But now it smelled of a graver mystery. Hermione's hurried notes had been the key. A tiny scratched engraving on a rusty tap, a serpent worn and ancient, not a decoration but a lock that could only yield to the voice of Slytherin's heir. Harry's words, soft and sibilant, slipped from his throat, a language that had no place in the human mouth, and the stone responded. The sink shimmered. The pipes began to writhe and groan. The basin sank away, leaving a dark, gaping maw in the stone floor. The descent into the pipes had begun. The responsibility for that descent should have fallen squarely on the shoulders of the Defence Against the Dark Arts professor. But Gilderoy Lockhart was a man built entirely from the stolen memories of others. Staring into that dark hole, his polished facade crumbled into raw animal panic. He had no intention of going down. His cowardice curdled into a desperate act of sabotage. A flick of his wand, a stolen spell meant to erase Harry and Ron's minds. But Ron's wand was broken, fractured and deeply unpredictable. The magic rebounded with a violent percussive blast. The ceiling above them groaned in protest. Stone and dust rained down, and then a solid wall of rock slammed down between Harry and everything familiar. Ron was gone. The tunnel was sealed. The collapse left Harry standing in a profound and deafening silence. He was entirely alone. The air in the pipe was damp and thick, carrying a musty weight of generations and something else. Something organic, something deeply dormant. He slid down into the blackness, the stone cold and slimy against his palms. This journey was a lonely one. No friendly voice, no reassuring presence. There was only the rhythmic drip of water and the immense pressure of the castle above. He was moving into the very foundations, into the bedrock where Slytherin had hidden his darkest secret. The path widened and became strewn with the brittle bones of creatures who had lost their way and never found it again. The darkness pressed in from every side, a silence so complete it felt like a living presence, a weight pressing on his eardrums. Every footstep was a lonely echo in the throat of the earth. He was no longer a student sneaking through a school. He was a trespasser in a tomb. The tunnel finally opened. The space expanded around him into a vast cavern, so wide and so high it defied the light. It was not a cave. It was a cathedral of dark ambition. Massive stone pillars entwined with the carved bodies of enormous serpents, rose into an unseen ceiling, bathed in a strange phosphorescent glow, a green light that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. And there, the centre of this immense and silent space, a colossal face loomed out of the gloom, a face carved from ancient rock, stern, powerful and deeply hateful, the face of Salazar Slytherin, a monument to purity, to power, and to the bitterness of a founder betrayed. It stared down at the solitary boy who had dared to penetrate its silence. The tunnel behind him was sealed, the darkness solidified around him, and the true horror of the chamber, the echo of a millennium of waiting, began to stir in the shadows beneath that ancient stone gaze. This was the moment Harry Potter came face to face with the heart of the legacy. This was the face of the founder. The tunnel collapsed behind you, sealing off any easy retreat as effectively as a locked tomb. Ron was just a few paces away, his wand lighting the murky darkness, while the shattered remnants of Gilderoy Lockhart's wand glowed faintly in the gloom. The air turned cold and stale, thick with the weight of centuries of silence. Ahead, rough-hewn stone gave way to something far older, far more deliberate. The walls became smooth, adorned with intertwined serpents, whose eyes seemed to follow you in the dim light. You were no longer in a sewer pipe. You had stepped into the antechamber of a forgotten throne room, and then the passage opened up, and the true scope of the horror revealed itself. The first thing that struck you was the sheer scale. This was not a dungeon, it was a cathedral carved from darkness. The ceiling soared into an abyss of shadow, so deep your torchlight could not touch it. Tall pillars, coiled with massive stone serpents, rose on either side, their eyes gleaming with a faint, sickly green luminescence. Water stretched across the floor, eerily still, reflecting the distant statues. But the centerpiece held your gaze captive. There, at the far end of the hall, stood a monolithic statue. It was the face of the founder, Salazar Slytherin himself. He was ancient, his beard and robes carved from the very bedrock of the castle, his expression one of cold, absolute judgment. This was not a monument to wisdom. This was a monument to control. And at his feet, a fragile, crumpled figure lay unconscious. Ginny Weasley. The chamber had claimed its latest victim. As you rushed forward, a flicker of movement drew your attention, not from the shadows, but from the diary lying open beside Ginny. A ghost of ink rose from the pages, twisting and solidifying, until a boy stood before you. He was tall, dark-haired, handsome in a way that felt sharp and dangerous. Tom Riddle, the memory of a student who had walked these halls 50 years before. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator, finally allowed to speak his name. You have been wondering how a simple diary could possess a girl. Force her to write. Make her open the chamber. He gestured around the hall. The diary is not just a diary. It is a piece of my soul, a Horcrux. He explained it without a hint of shame, as if he were describing a scholarly achievement. By pouring his soul into the diary, he had anchored a part of himself to the world, long after his body had left it. The diary fed on Ginny's fears, her hopes, her life, growing stronger with every secret she poured into it. It was a perfect parasitic relationship. He, the memory of Tom Riddle, was strong enough to take form, to walk the earth again, to command the beast that lay sleeping in the pool behind the statue. He was the Heir of Slytherin, and he had waited half a century for this moment. Then he told you his name, not Tom Riddle. That was his Muggle father's name, a name he despised. He had forged a new identity, a new purpose. He raised a wand, drawing the letters in the air, TOMRIDDLE. The letters swirled, rearranging themselves in a flash of green light, reforming into a single, terrifying declaration. IAMORART, the name that would become the greatest terror the wizarding world had ever known. It was an anagram of his birth name, a clever rebranding that hid his true lineage in plain sight. He was not just a clever student seeking revenge. He was the beginning of a dark empire, and he intended to use the Basilisk's power to complete what he had started in 1943. Harry Potter would die here, in the Chamber of Secrets, and the diary would have all the strength it needed to rise again, fully formed from the pages. The stone behind the statue groaned as a massive serpentine form stirred from the depths of the open mouth. The basilisk was awake. Tom Riddle watched, his eyes shining with dark anticipation. This was his moment of triumph, but he had not accounted for one thing: loyalty. A flash of scarlet and gold streaked through the darkness. Fawkes the Phoenix descended, carrying the Sorting Hat. This was no longer a confrontation. It was a battle for the very soul of Hogwarts. The heir of Slytherin and the boy who lived were about to collide in a duel that would decide the fate of the school. A duel written in the very history of the founders. The duel of the Heirs. Tom Riddle stands there, a ghost of ink and memory, and yet he is more real than any living soul in that chamber. He has spent 50 years in that diary, feeding on the life of a little girl who trusted him. And now, with Ginny Weasley drained, he is whole. Not quite solid, but enough to speak, enough to command. He tells Harry that he will soon be gone, that the last trace of Tom Riddle will vanish from the world. But first he wants to show Harry what power truly means. He wants to prove that the heir of Slytherin is not just a title, but a force of nature. Harry knows he has only seconds. He calls out to Fawkes, but the Phoenix is not there yet. He thinks of Dumbledore, of the Sorting Hat, of anything that might save him. But Riddle is calm, almost bored. He raises his wand, the wand he took from the diary, the wand that is not really his but which works here, in this dreamlike space. And then he speaks, in Parseltongue, the ancient hissing language that Harry understands without knowing how. Riddle does not shout. He does not gesture dramatically. He simply says one word, a command that echoes through the stone hall, and the statue of Salazar Slytherin begins to move. You have to picture this. For 1,000 years, the face of the founder has stared into the darkness of his own chamber, unmoving, unblinking. His mouth has been sealed, a stone grimace frozen in time. But now, at the sound of that word, the jaw begins to open. Slowly, with a grinding of ancient stone, the mouth yawns wide, and from that dark opening, something emerges. Not a trickle of water, not a cloud of dust. A serpent, a basilisk. Its body is thick as a tree trunk, its scales the colour of sickled moonlight, and its eyes are the most terrible thing of all. They are not yet open, not fully, but you know that when they open, you will die. The basilisk pours out of the statue's mouth like a river of muscle and hunger. It coils down the stone face, slithering across the floor, its enormous body filling the chamber. Harry can hear its breathing, a low hiss that vibrates through the soles of his shoes. Riddle laughs, a quiet, satisfied sound. He tells Harry that he will watch him die, and that no one will know, that Ginny will die next, and then the school will be purged, as Slytherin intended. Harry is frozen, not with fear, but with the terrible weight of the moment. He has no weapon. He has no plan. He has only a blind hope that Dumbledore's words were true. That help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. And then from above, there is a sound, a song, not a human song, but a liquid golden melody that seems to seep through the stones. Harry looks up, and through the gloom of the chamber, he sees a flash of crimson and gold. Fawkes, the Phoenix, is here, flying in a wide arc, trailing a tail of fire. He swoops down, and in his beak he carries something small and crumpled, the Sorting Hat. Of all things, Harry catches it as it falls, and for a moment he is confused. The hat has never helped anyone before. It has never been more than a talking relic that sorts children into houses. But Dumbledore's words echo again. It is a thinking cap, a thing of great magic. And in that moment, Harry understands. He is being given a chance, but the basilisk is moving. It has heard the song, and it does not like it. The serpent turns its massive head toward the phoenix, and now its eyes are opening. Slits of amber, then full circles of liquid death. Fawkes dives, a streak of flame, and he does something reckless. He flies straight into the basilisk's face, pecking at its eyes. The serpent hisses in rage and pain, and a spray of dark blood arcs through the air. The basilisk is blinded. It cannot see Harry, cannot kill him with a glance, but it can still hear him, still smell him, still crush him. The phoenix's sacrifice has given Harry one thing, a chance to survive long enough to strike. Now Harry remembers the sorting hat in his hands. He had no sword. He had no weapon. But the hat is not just a hat. It is the property of Godric Gryffindor, the founder who valued bravery above all else. And bravery, in this moment, is pulling the hat over his head, not to be sorted, but to receive something. As Harry pulls it down, he feels a weight, a pressure, and then something heavy and cold drops from inside the hat onto his head. He reaches up and pulls it free. It is a sword. The sword of Gryffindor, silver, glistening, set with rubies. A weapon that has not seen battle in centuries, but which is as sharp as the day it was forged. The hat has answered. It has given him the only thing that can kill a basilisk. The serpent is thrashing now, blind but furious. It sends its tail crashing into pillars, shaking the chamber. Harry knows he has one chance. He dodges a sweeping strike, rolls and runs toward the monster's head. The basilisk opens its mouth, hissing, and Harry can see the venomous fangs, each one longer than his arm. He does not hesitate. He plunges the sword upward into the roof of the basilisk's mouth, piercing through flesh and bone and into the brain. The creature convulses, a final spasm that throws Harry across the chamber, and then it goes still. The body of the basilisk lies dead on the stone floor, a mountain of serpentine flesh. The chamber is quiet again. Fawkes lands nearby, bleeding from where the basilisk's fang grazed him, but he is crying his healing tears over Harry's wound. For Harry has been struck, a fang poisoned, buried deep in his arm. He feels the venom spreading, cold and slow, and he knows that he is dying. But he also sees Riddle, fading, the diary pierced by the same fang that killed the basilisk. The venom that destroys the serpent also destroys the Horcrux, and as Riddle's form unravels, screaming, dissolving into nothing, Harry sinks to the ground. But at a cost. This moment, this duel, is more than a battle between a boy and a monster. It is the collision of two legacies. The basilisk was Slytherin's final weapon, a living expression of his belief that some should be purged. The sword of Gryffindor, delivered through the sorting hat, is Gryffindor's answer. That courage and loyalty will always rise to meet darkness. The hat itself, a relic that holds the wisdom of all four founders, chose to give that sword to a boy who was not in Gryffindor's house by choice but by action. It is a profound statement. The true heir of Slytherin could not control the serpent forever. The true heir of Gryffindor did not need to be a pureblood or a chosen one. He only needed to be brave enough to ask for help and to act when it came. And now as Harry lies bleeding, Fawkes sings. The phoenix's tears fall into the wound and the venom recedes. The life comes back. Harry opens his eyes to see the dead basilisk, the ruined diary, and Ginny stirring nearby. He has done what no one else could. But the story does not end here. The basilisk is dead, yes, but its death is just the beginning of a much longer shadow. The venom that killed it also destroyed a piece of Voldemort's soul, and that act will ripple forward into the years to come. Even as Harry gathers Ginny and rides Fawkes out of the chamber, the serpent's body remains below, a silent monument to a 1,000-year-old war. And in the weeks that follow, When the petrified students are revived and the truth comes out, one question lingers. What else did the Basilisk's venom touch? And what other secrets are still coiled in the dark beneath Hogwarts? The Serpent is gone, but its legacy has only just begun to unfold. And in the end, the death of the Serpent is not the closing of a chapter, but the opening of a door. You will see soon enough how that door swings wide, and what comes through it when it does. The world goes dark for the Basilisk, but that darkness only makes it more furious. Fawkes has blinded it, taking its eyes in a flash of fire and talons, and now the Serpent is thrashing in a rage born of pain and confusion. It cannot see, but it does not need sight to kill. It has other senses, a keen awareness of movement and sound, and it uses them with a predator's instinct. Harry is on the chamber floor, the sword of Gryffindor gripped tight in his hands. And he knows that this is the moment he has to act. The Basilisk cannot see him, but it can hear every subtle shift of his weight, every nervous breath. It is tracking him through the echoes of the stone. And Harry must turn that awareness against it. He moves quickly but deliberately, each step a calculated risk. He dodges behind the towering pillars, using the vast acoustics of the chamber to confuse the beast. The Basilisk lunges at shadows, its massive fangs scraping against the ancient stone, with a sound that grates on the soul. Harry is not fighting with strength or raw power. He is fighting with cunning. He uses the blindness as a weapon, turning the Basilisk's greatest vulnerability into his own tactical advantage. Every sound he makes is a feint, every movement a lure. He leads the Serpent around the chamber, wearing it down, exhausting its fury, waiting for the perfect opening. The moment comes when the Basilisk lunges forward, its mouth gaping wide in a desperate strike. Harry does not retreat. Instead, he leaps towards it, a move that defies every instinct of survival. He wraps his arms around the Serpent's neck, feeling the cold, slick scales against his skin as the beast rears up, trying to throw him off. The air is thick with venom and the smell of damp stone. Harry has the sword, and he knows exactly where it must go. With all the force he can muster, he drives the point of the blade into the roof of the Basilisk's mouth, deep into the soft tissue behind the fangs. The sword of Gryffindor sinks true, piercing through the skull and into the brain. The Basilisk shudders violently, a final, terrible convulsion that shakes the entire chamber. It is a killing blow, precise and absolute, but victory comes with a cost. As the great Serpent collapses, one of its fangs tears into Harry's arm, embedding itself deep in the flesh. The venom begins to spread, a cold fire that seeps through his veins, numbing his limbs and darkening his vision. He is dying, even as the monster dies beside him. The Serpent of Slytherin, the ancient terror of Hogwarts, is no more, but Harry lies there, the fang still lodged in his arm, the sword of Gryffindor still wet with the Basilisk's blood. The battle is over, and the cost has been paid. But that fang, that remnant of the beast, holds a purpose yet unfulfilled. The diary of Tom Riddle remains, pulsing with dark magic, and the venom of the Basilisk is the only thing that can destroy it. That is the story waiting in the shadows of the next chapter. Destroying the Horcrux, the Basilisk crashed to the chamber floor, its massive body coiling in a final, shuddering spasm before falling still. The sword of Gryffindor lay embedded in the roof of its mouth, slick with venom, and the creature's yellow eyes, now clouded and lifeless, stared into nothing. For a moment, the cavern was silent, except for the slow drip of water from the stone ceiling, and Harry's own ragged breathing. He had done it. He had killed the monster, but the victory was hollow, because Tom Riddle still stood before him, solid and smug, his eyes gleaming with a malice that no serpent could match. Harry pulled the sword free from the Basilisk's jaws, the blade glistening with the creature's deadly venom. He was covered in blood and sweat, his arm aching from the wound the basilisk's fang had torn into his flesh. He could feel the poison spreading, a cold numbness creeping up his arm, yet he forced himself to stay focused. Riddle watched him with an almost bored expression, as if the death of his pet was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "You have fought well, Harry Potter," Riddle said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "But you still do not understand what you are up against. The basilisk was merely a tool. The real power lies elsewhere." And in that moment, the truth struck Harry like a physical blow. The diary. The diary was the source of Riddle's power. Not the basilisk, not the chamber itself, but that small, innocent-looking black book. It had been feeding on Ginny's life force, growing stronger with every secret she poured into its pages. And now it had manifested a memory of Tom Riddle so vivid, so real, that he could walk and speak and cast spells. Harry looked down at the diary, which lay near the entrance of the chamber, closed but pulsing with a dark, malevolent energy. He understood now. If he could destroy the diary, he would destroy Riddle's hold on the physical world. The memory would vanish. Ginny would be free. But how? Fire had not worked. Ordinary magic could not touch it. Harry's mind raced. He thought of the basilisk's venom, the very substance that had nearly killed him, and he remembered that the sword of Gryffindor was now coated in that venom. The sword had been forged by a goblin and later used by Godric Gryffindor himself, and it was still wet with the basilisk's lethal poison. If anything could destroy the diary, it would be that venom. The irony was sharp, the same fang that pierced the creature. And now Harry's arm could be the key to destroying the soul fragment it had been used to create. Riddle must have sensed Harry's realization, because his smirk faltered. He lunged forward, but Harry was faster. Dropping the sword, he seized the diary from the stone floor and, with the last of his strength, drove the basilisk's fang deep into its cover. There was a sound like a scream, but not from the diary, from Riddle himself. The memory writhed, his form flickering like a dying candle flame. Black ink spurted from the torn pages, and then a terrible, high-pitched shriek tore through the chamber as the diary began to rot and curl. The pages turning to ash, the leather crumbling to dust. The possession was over. Harry collapsed to his knees, the diary disintegrating in his hands. The venom had done its work, but now the poison from his own wound was spreading faster. He could barely keep his eyes open. The world swam around him, and he knew he was fading. And then from somewhere above, he heard a soft, melodic cry. Fawkes, the phoenix, had been watching from a stone archway, his golden feathers gleaming in the dim light. The bird swooped down and landed on Harry's shoulder. And then it did something miraculous. It lowered its head and let a single, shimmering tear fall onto Harry's wound. The effect was immediate. The venom was neutralized, the flesh knitting itself back together, the strength flooding back into his limbs. Phoenix tears, as Dumbledore would later explain, have unparalleled healing powers. They can cure any poison, even that of a basilisk. Harry gasped, feeling the pain recede, and looked up to see Fawkes gazing at him with wise, ancient eyes. The phoenix had appeared in his darkest moment, had saved him from the basilisk's gaze, had brought him the sorting hat with the sword, and now had healed him. It was as if the spirit of Dumbledore himself was watching over him. Harry stumbled to his feet, the remains of the diary, nothing but a pile of black dust at his feet. Riddle's memory was gone, vanished into the ether, but his voice lingered for a split second, a faint echo of fury and disbelief. Ginny was stirring nearby, weak but alive. The chamber was quiet now, the great stone guardians of Slytherin staring down with empty eyes. The 1,000-year-old curse had been broken, not by a prophecy or a powerful wizard, but by a boy who understood that the true weapon was not magic, but sacrifice, and a little bit of luck. as Fawkes soared away, carrying the weight of the moment on his scarlet wings. Harry knew this would never be the end of the story. The diary was destroyed, but its creator, the real Tom Riddle, was still out there, growing stronger. The legacy of the chamber would echo through the years, shaping the choices of everyone who had been touched by its shadow. Ginny, Hagrid, Dumbledore, and most of all, Harry himself. That legacy would follow him into the next chapter of his journey, one that would test not just his courage, but his very understanding of what it means to be the Heir of Slytherin. The diary lies on the floor of the chamber, dripping with black ink and basilisk venom in equal measure. The shade of Tom Riddle dissolves into the air, screaming into the void of this 1,000-year-old dungeon. Ginny Weasley gasps back to consciousness, her eyes wide, confused, terror-stricken. And in the centre of this hall of shadow and stone, the basilisk sprawls dead across the floor, its blind eyes staring at nothing at all. The battle is over, but the legacy of this place is far from finished. What do you do with a monster that has haunted a school for 1,000 years? You leave it where it falls. Fawkes carries Harry, Ron and Ginny back to the surface. Lockhart is obliviated. The professors seal the entrance behind them, and the chamber tumbles back into silence. But the carcass of the basilisk does not simply rot in the dark. Its venom, the most lethal substance in the wizarding world, remains potent. Its skeleton becomes a monument beneath the lake, but its fangs become weapons. Years later, when the Second Wizarding War sweeps across the country like a wildfire of ashen terror, the chamber will echo with footsteps once more. Harry, Ron and Hermione need to destroy the Horcruxes of Lord Voldemort. They remember the basilisk in the dark. Ron and Hermione descend into the pipes again, navigating the gloom of the Founder's lair, and they pull a single sharp fang from the Serpent's jaw. That fang is driven into Helga Hufflepuff's cup, erasing the soul shard hidden within it. There is a deep and heavy irony in this. The weapon designed to purge Muggle-borns from Hogwarts became the instrument that destroyed the final protections of a half-blood tyrant. The venom of Salazar Slytherin's Purity Project was used to kill the very idea of that purity. The discovery of the chamber changes how the entire school sees Slytherin House. For generations, Slytherins walked the halls with a certain swagger. The chamber was a myth they could cling to, a secret weapon in their psychological arsenal. Our founder built a monster to protect us. It was a boast, a threat, a badge of honor. But when the truth finally breaks into the light, the myth cannot survive the reality. The monster was not a noble guardian. It was a tool for murder, a paranoid weapon built on racial hatred. The chamber was not a fortress for Slytherin pride. It was a death trap waiting for an heir. And that title, Heir of Slytherin, had been whispered with reverence and fear. Harry Potter himself was suspected, but the true heir was Tom Riddle, a boy who grew up to become Lord Voldemort. The heir was not a prince stepping into a kingdom. The heir was a bomb waiting to explode. After the chamber is opened, Slytherin House cannot hide behind the mystery anymore. The shame is public. The prejudice is exposed. The innocence of the house's public image is shattered. This forces a cultural fracture in the identity of Slytherin itself. It forces Slytherins to confront the darkness of their founder's philosophy. It makes room for the quiet resistance of a professor who wore 2 masks, and the reluctant redemption of a boy who realized too late that the blood-soaked glory of his family name was just a mask for cowardice. The Chamber of Secrets closes. The entrance is sealed, but the secret is no longer a secret. The darkest chapter in Hogwarts history does not end with the monster's death. It ends with the understanding of its purpose. The Heir of Slytherin myth is finally dead. Dumbledore understands this better than anyone. He tells Harry that Tom Riddle may have done terrible things, But he was never the heir the myth promised. The true heir was supposed to be a saviour of the pure blood, a purger of the unworthy. Riddle was a destroyer of worlds, including his own. The myth failed. The chamber itself becomes a relic. The stones no longer whisper. The pipes no longer groan with the passage of the Serpent. The statue of Salazar Slytherin stands alone in the dark, a silent monument to a broken promise. The deepest, darkest corner of Hogwarts is no longer a threat. It is just a room, a burial chamber for a dead ideology. But the memory of it lingers in the walls of the castle. The Chamber of Secrets is the place where the Founder's sin was made manifest. It is the birthplace of the Horcrux that set the modern story in motion. It is the grave of the Basilisk, and it is the site of Harry Potter's first true victory as a hero. It is a wound in the earth that has finally scarred over. It will never be beautiful. It will never serve its original purpose again, but it remains part of the castle forever. A permanent reminder that even the most powerful magic can be twisted by fear, and that the darkest secrets always, eventually, come to light. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.